My daughter is a debt collector. When she was 2 years old and just learning to speak, she called me dead, and as soon as she opened her mouth in middle school, her grades were poor. I advised my husband to enroll her in a tutoring class, but she grabbed my hair and tore off a large piece of my scalp later. She even used a utility knife to slash my lower body and set fire to my mosquito net. She loves her father. She loves her grandmother, but she hates me, her mother. Shut up, you're not my mother, you're just a breeding tool. It wasn't until just before my death that I found out. Back when we were doing IVF, hundreds of needle pricks, 10 months of pregnancy, and I gave birth to my husband and his lover's child. Opening my eyes again, I became their second child. Not too much, not too little, just a bit more favored than their daughter. I laughed. Are you ready, all of you? Another little debt collector is born. When I woke up, I found myself lying in a cradle. Wow. She opened her eyes. This child is so adorable, surrounded by the voices of strangers, but just then, a familiar girl's voice exploded in my ear. Where's the cuteness? All wrinkled like an old man, so ugly. My heart jolted in shock. Isn't that my daughter's voice? No, to be precise, it's my husband Josahai and his mistress's daughter at the same time. She is also the one who caused my death. Josahai and I started dating during our freshman year of college, and we got married not long after graduation. After getting married, I was planning to have a child, but Josahai disagreed with using natural conception. He kept brainwashing me. Mimi, we're both top students from 211 universities, so our child should have a head start from the embryo stage. Natural conception doesn't guarantee the best sperm, so let's go for IVF. Test tube babies can artificially select the highest quality sperm, so our child can be the most outstanding one in the future. At that time, I felt there was no need to go through such trouble. It didn't matter whether the child was the most outstanding or not, as long as she could grow up healthy and happy. I, as a mother, would be completely satisfied, but Josahai's attitude was very firm. If he doesn't do IVF, he would rather not have children. I had no choice but to undergo the egg retrieval surgery. During the surgery, the doctor did not administer anesthesia, so when the doctor inserted the needle through my vagina and pierced my posterior fornix, I screamed in pain. The entire surgery lasted half an hour, and during that half hour, I was in so much pain that my lips were trembling. When I was wheeled out of the operating room, my clothes were completely soaked in cold sweat, but when it came time for the embryo transfer, without my knowledge, my eggs were replaced with those of Josahai's mistress, and so, after 10 long months of pregnancy, I gave birth to Josahai and his mistress's child. Josahai named the child Jo Xian, perhaps because I have no blood relation with this child. Jo Xian only calls out for dad, grandpa, and grandma. She has never called me mom, and she never even speaks to me. On Jo Xian's second birthday, I was away on a business trip due to work requirements, yet I still braved the heavy snow and rushed back overnight. I returned home with a gift, hoping to make my daughter happy. Sweetie, mommy's back. Look what I bought for you. It's your favorite Barbie doll. Jo Xian reached out her hand, and I thought she was going to take the doll, but instead, she slapped the doll to the ground with her little hand and glared at me with hatred in her eyes. You evil aunt. I stood there as if struck by lightning. I never expected that the first words my daughter, whom I carried for 10 months, would say to me would be dead end. Although I felt heartbroken at the time, I always thought she was still young and didn't understand. I believed that when she grew up, she would naturally call me mom, but this wait lasted until she entered middle school. By then, I no longer cared how Jo Xian addressed me. I only hoped that my daughter could grow up healthy and happy. However, Jo Xian's academic performance was very poor, and her homeroom teacher had spoken with me multiple times. Since Jo Xian didn't like me, Josahai was always the one in charge of her studies. One night before bed, I suggested to Josahai that he enroll Jo Xian in a tutoring class, or else she might not even get into high school in the future, but I never expected that Jo Xian was eavesdropping at the door. Hearing Josahai agree, she kicked our bedroom door open. Damn aunt, I don't want to go to tutoring classes. You're the one who encouraged my dad. Jo Xian lunged at me, pinned me down on the bed, and started tearing at my hair with all her strength. By the time Josahai managed to pry her hands off, a large patch of my scalp had been torn off, leaving it bloody and raw. In the end, Josahai still sent Jo Xian to the tutoring class. Since then, Jo Xian's gaze towards me shifted from hatred to something sinister. One day, I was feeling unwell due to my period and took a day off from work to rest at home. While I was resting in bed, Jo Xian came home from school and brought her classmates with her. Jo Xian and her classmates were playing games in the living room, and the noise was so loud that I couldn't rest. I had to get up and tell them I wasn't feeling well. Asking Jo Xian and her classmates to keep their voices down. Upon hearing this, Jo Xian immediately threw the game controller at me. "You're not my mother. What right do you have to order me around?" The game controller hit me hard on the head. I was already on my period and feeling weak. After being hit like that, I immediately felt dizzy and fell to the floor. Jo Xian walked over to me and nudged me with the tip of her slipper. "Get up. Stop pretending." Seeing me clutching my stomach and refusing to get up, Jo Xian snorted disdainfully. "You're always pretending. Are you planning to keep it up until my dad comes back so he can beat me up? You act all virtuous in front of my dad every day, even whispering in his ear to send me to cram school." At that time, my stomach was hurting, and I was dizzy from being hit, so I couldn't stand up at all for a moment. Then I heard Jo Xian say again, "All right, since you're still pretending, don't blame me for being rude to you." The next moment, Jo Xian grabbed my hair and dragged me up from the ground. Jo Xian threw me onto the sofa in the living room, tore open my pants, and approached me step by step. I was bare-legged, terrified, and slowly shrinking back behind the sofa. "Xin, what are you going to do to Mom?" "Shut up, you're not my mom." Jo Xian had her classmates hold me down, and finally pulled out the craft knife I bought her yesterday. "You told my dad last time that you still want another child, right?" Jo Xian glared at me with a vicious look in her eyes. "You wish. My dad can only have one child. And that's me." After saying that, she pried my legs apart and, using the craft knife I had bought for her, stabbed my lower body over and over again. In the end, the pain was so unbearable that I passed out. When I woke up, I was already in the hospital. The doctor told me that my vagina had suffered severe trauma, causing extensive adhesions between the rectum and the uterus, and I was afraid I might never be able to get pregnant again. Upon hearing this, I was almost mentally shattered, and even thought that since Jo Xian didn't acknowledge me as her mother, I might as well sever our mother-daughter relationship. But Jo Zihai kept persuading me, saying that our daughter was still young and didn't understand things, and that when she grew up, she would be my little warm jacket. At that time, I thought, no matter what, Jo Xian was a piece of flesh that fell from my womb, my own daughter whom I had raised with my own hands. To ask me to sever ties with my own biological daughter, I couldn't bear it either. Moreover, I had also lost the ability to have children, so in the end, I still chose to forgive Jo Xian. But what I didn't expect was that my tolerance toward Jo Xian only led to her becoming even more extreme. During the time I was recuperating at home, Jo Xian would take advantage of my difficulty getting out of bed and stuff live mice into my blanket. The mouse scurried around in my quilt, scaring me so much that I tumbled out of bed in a panic, ultimately tearing open my wound and sending me back to the hospital. At that time, I couldn't understand, no matter how hard I thought about it, why would my own daughter do something so cruel to me, until one day, Jo Xian stood by my bedside with a lighter and told me the whole truth, and in her mind, I was the one who was the other woman. The reason she couldn't be with her biological mother was all because of me. Before I could explain, Jo Xian had already set my mosquito net on fire and locked me in the room. I watched helplessly as the flames slowly consumed me. I saw the fire spread and engulf my entire body, but I couldn't put it out. Looking at the skin all over my body, large patches of blood blisters were burned into it. Enduring the excruciating pain throughout my body, I desperately pounded on the bedroom door and cried out for help, praying that someone would come to rescue me. But Jo Xian deliberately turned the music volume up to the maximum, drowning out my cries for help with the sound of the music. Large amounts of carbon monoxide and overheated gases continuously invaded my respiratory tract, and I felt my throat swelling. I could no longer make any sound, and in the end, I could only collapse into the scorching sea of fire, ceasing to breathe. To my surprise, when I opened my eyes again, I had become the daughter of Jo Zihai and his lover. At this moment, Jo Zihai and his lover, Lin Shuerui, had already gotten married. Through their conversation, I learned that Lin Shuerui had always wanted a child. Lin Shuerui's previous husband was impotent, but his family was wealthy and influential. Lin Shuerui didn't dare divorce him, which is why she got involved with my husband. Although the two of them used my womb to secretly give birth to Jo Xian, Lin Shuerui always felt that Jo Xian wasn't born from her own body, and she could always see my shadow in Jo Xian. So Lin Shuerui wanted a child that was completely her own, which is why she married my husband after her own husband died and gave birth to me. After I was born, Lin Shuerui held me in her arms with great joy. "Our little girl is so adorable. Look, she's not even crying." Jo Zihai chimed in with a smile. She probably knows her mom is tired and feels for her. With Jo Zihai's words, Lin Shuerui became even happier and gave me a name on the spot, and the whole family was also delighted by my arrival. Only Jo Xian coldly tossed out a sentence: "The little sister is so ugly, all wrinkled, like a little old man." Lin Shuerui immediately darkened her face. How can you say that about your sister? Zhou Zihai also scolded Zhou Xian. Your mother just gave birth to your sister. She's exhausted. Don't make your mother angry. My sister is ugly, Zhou Xian complained. I feel like throwing up just looking at her, and you all say she's cute. If you don't like it, don't look. Lin Shuerui ignored Zhou Xian and happily sang a nursery rhyme to me. My gaze passed through the cradle, looking at Zhou Xian, who was gritting her teeth in anger, and I giggled at her. My little debt-collecting daughter, are you ready? Your dead end is coming to collect her debt, because I was a premature baby. I was extremely ugly when I was born, and my health was very poor, with congenital kidney failure, so not long after birth, I was sent to the neonatal intensive care unit. It wasn't until I was 3 months old and my physical condition had stabilized that I was finally brought home. When I first returned home, although I was no longer as ugly as before, my body was still frail, and I had to go to the hospital every week for dialysis, so every time Zhou Xian passed by my little bed, she would mock me, ugly little thing, it's so ugly. But as I grew older, my skin became fairer, and my facial features gradually took shape. By the time I was almost 8 months old, I already had a pair of bright, dark eyes, and when I smiled, there were 2 little dimples. When Lin Shuerui took me out for a walk, the neighbors all praised me, saying I looked like a little princess. Zhou Xian's gaze towards me also shifted from disdain to jealousy. Her sarcastic remarks turned into, what's the use of being pretty? You're still just an early death ghost, probably thinking I wasn't dying fast enough. Zhou Xian deliberately mixed foreign objects like embroidery needles and rat poison into my supplementary food several times. Fortunately, my body was weak, and I would always accidentally knock over the supplementary food bowl, preventing her from succeeding. Soon, my first birthday arrived. Lin Shuerui held a birthday banquet for me. At the banquet, relatives and friends kept praising my beauty, which made Lin Shuerui beam with joy. Zhou Xian, on the other hand, sat to the side and said sarcastically, my classmates all told me that people who are too good-looking when they're young only get uglier as they grow up. Don't talk nonsense. Lin Shuerui glared at Zhou Xian, clearly displeased that Zhou Xian had openly contradicted her in front of everyone. Zhou Xian, however, spoke with confidence. Mom, what I said is true. There was a very pretty girl in our elementary school, but now that she's in middle school, But before Zhou Xian could finish, I pointed at a piece of paper with my little finger. Wrong. The star of today's banquet was supposed to be me, so as soon as I spoke, no one was interested in listening to what Zhou Xian was saying anymore. Everyone's gaze fell on me. What is she saying? Lin Shuerui's aunt asked in confusion. Lin Shuerui leaned over to take a look at the paper in front of me, then froze for a moment. This is Xinxin's practice paper. Could it be that Anin is saying Xinxin's practice paper is wrong? How could that be? Zhou Zihai chuckled. Anin isn't even a year old yet, and Xinxin's paper is 5th grade math problems. Because Zhou Xian's math is so poor, she is still catching up on the basics of 5th grade math. I pointed at one of the incorrectly calculated problems and uttered a babyish monosyllable. 3. Lin Shuerui deliberately glanced at the question I pointed to and immediately exclaimed, it's 3, this question really is 3. Zhou Zihai didn't believe it and quickly snatched the test paper over. The next second, his expression was just as shocked as Lin Shuerui's. Zhou Xian, on the other hand, was dumbfounded, as if in a dream, watching Lin Shuerui, Zhou Zihai, and a group of relatives surround me. Lin Shuerui pointed to another question and asked me excitedly, Anin, Mommy is asking you, what is the answer to this question? Everyone else also craned their necks, waiting for my answer. I tilted my head and used my little finger to make a 5. The room erupted in gasps of surprise. After that, someone tested me with a few calculation problems, and I gave the correct answers using my fingers. At this point, Zhou Xian's face finally turned pale. Genius, a true genius. This child is barely 1 year old, and he can already solve math problems. Is this some kind of child prodigy reincarnation? Lin Shuerui and Zhou Zihai were so excited they couldn't close their mouths, eager to take me to the hospital to check my intelligence level. Zhou Xian grabbed Lin Shuerui and said with grievance, Mom, why do you only care about my sister? Have you forgotten that you promised me tonight to help me buy that JK outfit I had my eye on last time? Buy. All you know is buying. Lin Shuerui waved Zhou Xian's hand away. You're in middle school, yet you still make mistakes on 5th grade math problems. How dare you ask me to buy you JK? Lin Shuerui dropped this sentence and carried me into the car. Through the car window, I saw Zhou Xian standing by the roadside, so angry that she bit her lips until they turned purple. I curled the corner of my mouth at her. My dearest daughter, you have always dreamed of receiving love from your biological mother. For that love, you even tried to kill me twice. In that case, this dead end, will crush every last bit of your dreams. Lin Shuerui and Zhou Zihai rushed me to the hospital. Overnight, with my deliberate restraint, the doctor assessed that my intellectual level was already on par with that of an elementary school child, and concluded, this child might indeed be a genius. Hearing the doctor say this, Lin Shuerui cherished me even more as the apple of her eye as she replaced all my supplies with top-tier brands. She also hired the most renowned nutritionist in the entire industry to specifically oversee my diet. This nutritionist worked meticulously, leaving Zhou Xian no opportunity to tamper with my food. As a result, after this, whenever Zhou Xian saw me, although she was even more furious and resentful, she was left with no way to take action. Lin Shuerui gave me the best things in the house. This favoritism probably sparked Zhou Xian's competitive spirit, so in the following months, Zhou Xian really focused all her efforts on studying, hoping to gain Lin Shuerui's attention this way. But one night, when Zhou Xian excitedly handed her test paper to Lin Shuerui and said to her, "Mom, I got 88 points in math, am I amazing?" Lin Shuerui impatiently pushed Zhou Xian away. What's there to boast about with an 88, and in is getting perfect scores in every subject now, move aside, I still have to take an in to buy clothes, don't waste my time. Zhou Xian's test paper, which had scored 88 points, was thrown on the ground by Lin Shuerui as if it were trash. I leaned on Lin Shuerui's shoulder, watching as Zhou Xian, her face flushed with shame and anger, tore the test paper into pieces. That night, while the whole family was sound asleep, I quietly climbed down from my small bed. I opened Lin Shuerui's wallet and secretly placed the stack of bills inside into Zhou Xian's school bag. The next morning, when Lin Shuerui couldn't find the money, she asked Zhou Zihai, "Did you take the money from my wallet?" Zhou Zihai was completely baffled. "No, I didn't. Who touched the money in my wallet?" Lin Shuerui wondered, "Who would bother touching the money in your wallet for?" "No reason," Zhou Zihai said. "Did you spend it yourself?" "Impossible. This money was a red envelope my parents gave to an inn yesterday when I visited them. I was planning to go to the bank today to deposit it for an inn." As soon as Lin Shuerui finished speaking, she noticed Zhou Xian, who was organizing her school bag, pause her movements. "What's wrong?" Lin Shuerui was very perceptive. Zhou Xian, in disbelief, pulled out a stack of cash from her school bag. "Isn't this my 10,000 yuan from yesterday?" Lin Shuerui grabbed Zhou Xian's hand angrily. "You actually stole Mom's money." "I didn't." Zhou Xian was a bit stunned. "None." Lin Shuerui flared up. "If there's none, how did this money end up in your backpack?" "I really don't know how this money got into my backpack." Zhou Xian was so anxious she was on the verge of tears, pointing at me beside her. "Maybe an and put it in." I had already learned from Lin Shuerui and Zhou Zihai's conversation that Zhou Xian indeed had quite a few issues and was considered a troubled girl at school. Therefore, Lin Shuerui had almost no trust in her. Lin Shuerui had a fiery temper. Seeing that Zhou Xian was still trying to argue, she grabbed a cup from the table and threw it at her feet. "You stole the money yourself, and now you're trying to pin it on your sister. If you don't study hard, fine, I can tolerate that. If you hang out with a bunch of shady people, I can tolerate that too. But now what? You've even learned to steal money from home. You really are the spawn of that wretched woman. Not a single trace of me in you." Lin Shuerui was probably truly angry, as she was already speaking without thinking, even dragging me into it. But my goal had already been achieved. Originally, before I came along, Lin Shuerui had always valued her daughter Zhou Xian very much. No matter how much trouble Zhou Xian caused or how poor her grades were, Lin Shuerui would never be too harsh on her. After that incident, Lin Shuerui's gaze towards Zhou Xian gradually turned cold. No matter how hard Zhou Xian tried to please her, Lin Shuerui always responded with just one cold word, unwilling to give up. Zhou Xian began to work hard, staying up late every night to do her homework. Finally, she scored a perfect mark on a math test, but when she happily took her perfect test paper to Lin Shuerui for a signature, Lin Shuerui asked her suspiciously, "Didn't you cheat?" Zhou Xian loudly defended herself. "How could I do such a thing?" Lin Shuerui sneered coldly. "You even stole your mother's money. What else wouldn't you do?" Zhou Xian was so angry she cried, "Mom, I really didn't." "Fine, you didn't. Why are you shouting so loudly? Look, you've woken up in." Lin Shuerui was furious. I was lying in Lin Shuerui's arms, actually having woken up long ago. When I opened my eyes, I saw Zhou Xian angrily snatch back her test paper, turn around, and return to her own room, her eyes filled with endless grievance. I giggled. "My precious daughter, is this all you can't handle?" But this is just the beginning. I accidentally saw Zhou Xian's WeChat password. At night, after confirming that Zhou Xian was sound asleep, I used her phone to chat with one of her friends named Lu Bing. I know that Lu Bing was originally from Zhou Xian's school, but he was later expelled for fighting. I also know that Lu Bing has always liked Zhou Xian, so I used Zhou Xian's WeChat to repeatedly express my affection for Lu Bing, even saying I wanted to take things further with him. Lu Bing, being a troublemaker, naturally Didn't refuse when Zhou Xian said that. I sent Lu Bing the password to my house and arranged to meet him at 4 p.m. on Friday. This time of day was also when the nanny would take me downstairs for a walk. I figured Lu Bing had already succeeded, so I pretended to have a stomachache. I was Lin Shuerui and Zhou Zihai's precious darling. Hearing me cry out in pain, the nanny was so frightened that she immediately called both of them. Lin Shuerui and Zhou Zihai immediately dropped what they were doing and, seeing me clutching my stomach, hurriedly tried to take me to the hospital, but I firmly refused to get in the car, crying and saying, "I'm scared of the shot. I want Mato to come with me." Lin Shuerui and Zhou Zihai both knew that Mato was my favorite teddy bear. Every night, I had to hold Mato to fall asleep. "Mom will go upstairs to get Mato for you, and then get in the car first and wait for Mom." Lin Shuerui doted on me so much that she naturally fulfilled all my requests, but when Lin Shuerui opened the combination lock and saw Zhou Xian and Lu Bing in disheveled clothes, along with the mess all over the floor, she let out a terrified scream. Shameless creatures! I could hear Lin Shuerui's furious roar even from downstairs. Immediately after, Zhou Xian's wailing and crying followed. At this moment, my stomach just happened to stop hurting, so Zhou Zihai picked me up and hurriedly rushed upstairs. Pushing open the door, I saw Zhou Xian kneeling on the floor, crying and shouting, "Mom, it wasn't me, it was Lu Bing who forced me. I forced you." Lu Bing opened his phone and threw the WeChat chat records in front of Zhou Xian. "It was clearly you who said no one would be at your house this afternoon and invited me over to hook up." Zhou Xian stared at those chat records in horror, her eyes wide open. "It wasn't me, I never sent any of these messages." He anxiously shouted to Lin Shuerui, "Mom, I didn't send these, someone is trying to frame me." Lin Shuerui also saw those unsightly words, so angry that the veins on her neck bulged out. "The chat times are all late at night. At that hour, you're always at home. Who could possibly frame you? Could it be me or your dad?" Zhou Xian panicked too, suddenly looking at me. "Could it be?" And then, Lin Shuerui slapped Zhou Xian across the face, gritting her teeth as she said, "And is only 1.5 years old, she can barely speak. How dare you try to shift the blame onto her? Mom, listen to me." Zhou Xian's face was swollen from the slap, but she still clung to Lin Shuerui's leg, trying to explain, but Lin Shuerui kicked her away. "Don't touch me, you're disgusting. How could I have such a shameless daughter?" Seeing that Lin Shuerui didn't believe her, Zhou Xian crawled tearfully to Zhou Zihai's feet. "Dad, it really wasn't me." Zhou Zihai usually doted on Zhou Xian, but after seeing those chat records, he could only shake his head helplessly, throw the phone on the ground, and carry me away. I lay on Zhou Zihai's shoulder and saw Zhou Xian, like a marionette with its strings cut, slumped to the ground. Zhou Xian cried from afternoon until night. She even called the police, accusing Lu Bing of raping her. However, Lu Bing presented her chat records with Zhou Xian, leading the police to conclude that it was consensual and not a case of rape. The incident caused quite a stir, and the wealthy ladies in Lin Shuerui's social circle all found out about it, often teasing her about it. Lin Shuerui felt utterly humiliated and ended up scolding Zhou Xian several more times. After that, her attitude toward Zhou Xian turned ice cold. Zhou Xian had previously studied diligently for a period, and her grades had improved significantly. However, because of this incident, her grades fell back to their original level. 3 months later, in the high school entrance exam, she achieved the remarkable feat of ranking last in the entire city. Because of these results, Lin Shuerui was once again mocked by the wealthy ladies in her social circle. Angered, Lin Shuerui gave Zhou Xian a good beating that very night. With such grades, Zhou Xian wouldn't be able to get into high school. She could only attend a vocational school. When it came time to choose a major, Zhou Xian opted for fashion design, because I knew her dream was to become a famous fashion designer when she grew up. But how could a murderer deserve a brilliant life? The night before school started, I accidentally left my marbles at the top of the stairs. Zhou Xian was in a hurry to report to the vocational school in the morning and didn't notice the marbles. She stepped on them, let out a scream, and then tumbled down the stairs. Zhou Xian was taken to the hospital. After diagnosis, the doctor said that Zhou Xian's nerves were severely damaged, and she was completely paralyzed from the waist down. Zhou Xian knew that she would have to rely on a wheelchair and bed for the rest of her life, and she completely broke down emotionally, even hysterically threatening to kill me. But I only accidentally dropped the marbles at the top of the stairs. Just like back then, Zhou Xian had only accidentally set my mosquito net on fire. No one blamed her at the time, and now, naturally, no one will blame me either. Zhou Xian can no longer wear the JK uniforms she loved, nor did she get to study the fashion design major she had always dreamed of. She could only sit in a wheelchair, and even going to the bathroom required someone to assist her. room was perpetually filled with the smell of urine and feces. Lin Shuerui and Zhou Zihai detested this odor and rarely entered her room. Moreover, with a genius daughter like me around, Lin Shuerui and Zhou Zihai could go a whole week without speaking to Zhou Xian unless absolutely necessary, but my health was deteriorating. Congenital kidney failure meant my dialysis frequency increased from once a week to once every 3 days. The doctor advised Lin Shuerui to arrange a kidney transplant for me as soon as possible, otherwise my life would be in danger. Just like when I was 1 year old, Zhou Xian told me that no matter how good-looking I was, it was useless. I couldn't escape the fate of a short-lived ghost. Lin Shuerui searched the world for a suitable kidney donor for me, but none matched. I heard that the chances of a match are higher among blood relatives, so Lin Shuerui mobilized the whole family to undergo kidney compatibility testing. In the end, the only person who matched me was Zhou Xian. Lin Shuerui was overjoyed and said to Zhou Xian, "That's wonderful, Xinxin, hurry up and donate a kidney to your sister." But Zhou Xian refused outright, saying, "I don't want to. I've already lost so much. Mom, you still want me to give my kidney to my sister? Why should I?" Lin Shuerui immediately pulled a long face. "You have 2 kidneys. What's the big deal if you lose one?" Zhou Zihai also tried to persuade Zhou Xian, "Xinxin, Anan is your own sister. We can't be so selfish." "I don't want to anyway." Zhou Xian pointed at me fiercely. "If it weren't for her, I wouldn't be sitting in a wheelchair like a useless person. How can you talk like that?" Lin Shuerui raised her voice to defend me. "You weren't watching where you were going and fell down yourself. How can you blame your sister for that?" He threatened Zhou Xian again. "You're eating and drinking off me every day now, and you won't even agree to donate a kidney to your sister. If that's the case, then you shouldn't stay in this house anymore." In Zhou Xian's current state, if no one takes care of her, she would simply starve to death. So even if Zhou Xian was unwilling, she had no choice but to compromise in the end. After I received Zhou Xian's kidney transplant, my health improved more and more. I feel like I've been given a brand new, fully charged battery, brimming with endless energy every day. But ever since Zhou Xian donated a kidney to me, her health has deteriorated drastically. Every night, I can hear her coughing. A vibrant young woman in the prime of her life now resembles an elderly person suffering from asthma, but this level is far from enough to erase the hatred in my heart. I waited quietly, biding my time until the moment was ripe to deliver a fatal blow to Zhou Xian. In a season of blooming spring flowers, I had already turned 5 years old, holding the pigeon soup that the nanny had just served me. I walked into Zhou Xian's room. As soon as I entered the door, I was almost overwhelmed by the foul stench that hit me. It was the smell of Zhou Xian's excrement and urine. Over the past 2 years, as I became increasingly outstanding, Lin Shuerui and Zhou Zihai had almost forgotten that they had a daughter named Zhou Xian. Even the nanny's care for Zhou Xian had become much more negligent. I saw that the nanny hadn't even emptied the urine that Zhou Xian had passed in the morning. The urine pot was placed on the same counter as the breakfast plate she had left unfinished. I held back the foul smell and walked over to Zhou Xian's bedside. "Sister, have some soup." I handed the soup bowl over, and just as Zhou Xian reached up to take it, I splashed the scalding pigeon soup onto her face. Zhou Xian let out a sharp cry of "ah," and scolded me angrily. "What are you doing? That's scalding hot. Is it really that hot?" I suddenly leaned in close to Zhou Xian, revealing a sinister smile. "When you burned me to death, I was 10,000 times hotter than this." Zhou Xian froze for a long time, her eyes fixed and unmoving, even forgetting to wipe the soup and water splattered all over her face. Finally, she snapped back to reality, looking at me with an expression of utter terror. "You are anti-death." It was like finding the end of a tangled thread. She finally pieced together all the clues one by one. "So back then, it was you who took my mom's money and stuffed it into my backpack, and it was also you who used my phone to send ambiguous messages to Lu Bing. You knew I had to report to school early that day, so you deliberately placed marbles at the top of the stairs. You made me fall down the stairs." Zhou Xian screamed hysterically at me, while I just curled the corner of my mouth and smiled at her. "Sweetie, these are all gifts from Mom. Do you like them?" Zhou Xian's gaze turned as sinister as it had been in her previous life. "You're insane. You've ruined me like this. I'll make sure you die a miserable death too." With that, Zhou Xian lunged at me, but I smiled, pulled a utility knife from my sleeve, and slashed it across my own neck. With a ripping sound, blood gushed down my neck, staining my snow-white little dress red. Zhou Xian was completely stunned by my actions. Although no one remembers anymore, Mom still wants to say, "Happy 18th birthday, my dear." After saying these words, I pretended to panic. The moment the nanny rushed in, I mustered all my strength and shouted, "Help, don't kill me." Then, I collapsed to the ground. I didn't cut my throat, just nicked a vein in my neck, although there was quite A bit of bleeding. With today's medical technology, as long as the bleeding is stopped in time, it won't be fatal. When I regained consciousness, I saw Lin Shuerui and Zhou Zihai staring at me anxiously. Anin is awake. Lin Shuerui was both happy and worried, asking me, Anin, why did you cut your neck? I looked at Zhou Xian behind Lin Shuerui and pretended to be very scared. It was my sister who did it. Lin Shuerui and Zhou Zihai were stunned for a moment, looking at Zhou Xian in disbelief. I didn't do it. Zhou Xian pointed at me, her eyes filled with terror. She did it herself. Why would I use a knife to harm her for no reason? I originally wanted to bring my sister some pigeon soup, but she suddenly got angry with me and said I stole Mom and Dad. I lay on the hospital bed, my voice hoarse as I said, she said, as long as she kills me, Mom and Dad will be hers again. I didn't. She's framing me. Zhou Xian pointed at me, hysterically shouting at Lin Shuerui, all the bad things before were done by her. She took your money and put it in my bag. She sent ambiguous messages to Lu Bing, causing me to lose my innocence. But before she could finish, the police walked into the hospital room. Ms. Lin, Mr. Zhou, according to our fingerprint comparison, your eldest daughter's fingerprints were indeed found on the utility knife that injured your younger daughter. Moreover, based on the testimony of your housekeeper, she did hear your younger daughter calling for help at the time of the incident. The police handed the investigation report to Lin Shuerui. Lin Shuerui stared at Zhou Xian in shock. You actually wanted to kill your own sister? I didn't kill her. Zhou Xian kept shaking her head. And she's not my sister, she's the dead aunt. The dead aunt. Lin Shuerui had no idea what Zhou Xian meant by dead aunt. In a fit of rage, she slapped Zhou Xian across the face. Enough, your fingerprints are on the knife. What more is there to argue about? Zhou Xian's face was swollen from the beating, but she didn't resist. With a frenzied look in her eyes, she clung tightly to Lin Shuerui's waist. Mom, you have to believe me. You must believe me. Lin Shuerui kicked her wheelchair over. There are witnesses and evidence. How can you expect me to believe you? Seeing that Lin Shuerui didn't believe her, Zhou Xian struggled to prop herself up and turned her pleading gaze toward Zhou Zihai. Dad, you have to believe Xinxin. I didn't cut her with a knife. Zhou Zihai let out a deep sigh. Xinxin, you've really let your father down. Lying on the hospital bed, I watched the last glimmer of light fade from Zhou Xian's pupils. In my previous life, Zhou Xian killed me, yet she lived happily all these years as if nothing had happened. Now, I have finally waited for Zhou Xian's 18th birthday. I made her atone for all the sins she had committed on the very first day of her adulthood. Zhou Xian was ultimately sentenced to 10 years in prison for attempted murder. Her beautiful youth will be spent behind bars, but my revenge is not yet over. The reason Zhou Zihai initially betrayed his marriage and chose to have an affair with Lin Shuerui was because Lin Shuerui was a wealthy second-generation heiress. The money from Lin Shuerui's family could allow Zhou Zihai to work at least 20 years less in this highly desirable big city. To satisfy his greed, Zhou Zihai did not hesitate to swap my eggs, making me raise someone else's child for over a decade for nothing. By this time, Zhou Zihai had already used Lin Shuerui's family connections to become the director of a certain bureau, so for the next 2 years, I collected a large amount of evidence of Zhou Zihai's bribery and corruption, and anonymously sent this evidence to the procuratorial authorities. Zhou Zihai was quickly taken away by the procuratorial authorities for investigation. Since the evidence was true, the amount of embezzlement was huge, and it happened to coincide with the anti-corruption campaign. Zhou Zihai was ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment. Lin Shuerui's company was also affected as a result, but Lin Shuerui's family background is substantial. Just the case of Zhou Zihai is not enough to shake her foundation. Lin Shuerui continues to run her company while dedicating all her energy to nurturing me, her genius daughter. In my previous life, I was already a PhD student from a prestigious university. Therefore, in this life, I earned my PhD from an Ivy League university at the age of 13. Becoming a well-known genius girl, Lin Shuerui has also been interviewed multiple times by television stations because of my excellence. The wealthy ladies in her social circle have also turned green with envy one by one. Lin Shuerui has been in the spotlight for so many years that she has even forgotten about Zhou Xian, who is still serving her sentence. I calculated the time. It has been about 5 years since Lin Shuerui last visited her. Because of my excellence, Lin Shuerui handed over all the companies under her name to me, planning to retire early. After that, she intended to enjoy the benefits I would bring her, but not long after, I started dating a man 50 years older than me. When Lin Shuerui heard about it, she came to me in a rage, demanding that I break up with the old man, but I wouldn't listen, and as if possessed, I was determined to give half of my company's shares to the old man. Upon learning of this, Lin Shuerui was so furious that she was hospitalized. During her hospitalization. To show my filial piety, I deliberately escorted the old man to visit her, successfully provoking her into a heart attack after Lin Shuerui's death. I did not erect a tombstone for her. Instead, I scattered her ashes into the pig feed at the farm, because my resentment towards her was no less than that of Zhou Xian and Zhou Zihai. After all, if she hadn't encouraged Zhou Zihai back then to switch my eggs, I wouldn't have given birth to Zhou Xian. During Zhou Xian's upbringing, Lin Shuerui continuously brainwashed her, making Zhou Xian believe that I was the mistress who broke up her biological parents, which is why she killed me. The reason I haven't sought revenge on her all these years is to build her expectations to the highest point. Only when her expectations shatter will it be enough to break her heart. Not long after, my boyfriend died from an overdose of Viagra. Yes, I did it, because this old man was the doctor who performed my IVF procedure 15 years ago. If he hadn't accepted Zhou Zihai's bribe and hadn't replaced my eggs, none of these tragedies would have happened. In the spring 2 years later, Zhou Xian was released from prison. As her only relative, I came to the prison to pick her up upon her release. Having learned that Lin Shuerui and Zhou Zihai were both dead, coupled with the 10 years of imprisonment, Zhou Xian was much more subdued when she saw me again. When she was pushed in front of me, she even looked at me with a frightened, ingratiating expression. Mom, Xinxin knows she was wrong. Mom used to love Xinxin so much. Please don't blame Xinxin anymore. Xinxin still remembers when she was little. Mom would often buy Xinxin her favorite Barbie dolls. Of course, your mom's precious baby. How could mom blame you? I smiled and brought Zhou Xian back home. I took Zhou Xian to the amusement park, watched movies together, and went to the toy store, buying her lots and lots of Barbie dolls. Every time we came back, Zhou Xian would happily act coquettishly with me, saying, Mom, it turns out you're the one who treats me the best. Mom, I love you. But not long after, my house caught fire. During the fire, because I had the music turned up too loud, no one heard Zhou Xian's cries for help. Zhou Xian was burned alive. In the morgue, I looked at Zhou Xian's charred body and placed her favorite Barbie doll on her chest. Rest in peace, my beloved, whom I have loved and hated for 30 years. After hearing the first story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Next, there is another similar story. Let's continue to see. In my previous life, my grandmother left me a jade pendant and a gold bracelet on her deathbed. My sister, thinking the jade pendant was unlucky, snatched the gold bracelet and left without a care. I kept the jade pendant and unexpectedly activated a spiritual spring space, turning my life around to become wealthy. But after she squandered all her money, she actually pushed me off a tall building. Back to the day of the choice, my sister snatched the jade pendant. This time, I want it. I lowered my head to hide my smile. She didn't know that the real spiritual spring wasn't in the jade pendant at all. This jade pendant is our family heirloom. Alice, Sarah, which of you wants it? Grandma looked at the two of us with weak but loving eyes before she passed away. Both my sister and I were her beloved granddaughters. This jade pendant, I'll take it. Alice's voice jolted me awake. I shifted slightly and realized, to my surprise, that I was kneeling by my grandmother's bedside. There was no feeling of weightlessness from falling off a building before death, no overwhelming regret or resentment, and no pain from the final impact. I, Sarah, have been reborn. I look at the gray jade pendant in Alice's hand. In my past life, my sister despised this pendant as ugly and dirty, calling it a dead person's thing, and stubbornly refused to take it. Finally, she took the gold bracelet off Grandma's wrist and left. Now, in the funeral hall, the flickering candlelight illuminated her slightly flushed cheeks. Flushed with excitement, I lowered my head to hide the shock in my eyes, my heart pounding like a drum. She had been reborn too. Sarah, you wouldn't compete with your sister, would you? Alice clutched the jade pendant tightly in her palm, giving me a fake smile. My sister has always liked jade, so this piece can serve as a keepsake. You take the gold bracelet. It's more valuable. I slowly looked up, my gaze sweeping over her fingers, which were tense with nervousness. In our past life, she didn't say it like this. I wouldn't even take this worthless jade pendant if it were free. If you like it, sister, take it, I said softly, reaching out to remove the dull gold bracelet from Grandma's wrist. The moment I touched my grandmother's skin, the icy coldness made my nose sting with emotion. In my previous life, it was after finishing my grandmother's funeral that I discovered the spiritual spring space hidden within the jade pendant. My sister, on the other hand, sold the gold bracelet for money, squandered it all, and ended up in poverty, eventually even developing murderous intentions toward me. With a thud, my sister suddenly knelt before our grandmother's memorial, her cries exaggeratedly loud. Grandma, please rest in peace. Sarah and I will be just fine. As she wept, she stole glances at the jade pendant in her hand, her fingers constantly rubbing its surface as if expecting something to happen. I Watched her performance with a cold eye. She was so eager, clearly knowing the secret of the jade pendant. Why is Alice so sensible today? Her mother wiped her tears and sighed. She's usually the most afraid of these things. Mom, Alice quickly interrupted. I just suddenly realized, Grandma loved us the most when she was alive. I silently arranged Grandma's burial clothes, my fingers pausing at the collar, where her favorite gardenia should have been pinned. In the previous life, I was the one who placed it, but in this life, I haven't done it yet. I put Grandma's favorite gardenia, Alice said proudly, pointing to the slightly wilted white flower on Grandma's chest, her face full of eagerness to please. I remember Grandma said the fragrance of this flower could guide the way. A chill ran down my spine. Grandma said this to me in private. My sister wasn't even there. Not only has she been reborn, but she also wants to replicate my past life experiences. After the funeral, Alice was unusually busy, but while helping to sort through Grandma's belongings, her eyes kept glancing at the jade pendant. When no one was looking, she secretly pricked her finger to drip blood onto the jade pendant or examined it under the moonlight, her anxiety becoming increasingly hard to conceal. Sarah, have you chosen a burial site for Grandma? Father asked, smoking his pipe. I want to bury her on that flat land behind the mountain, following the ancient customs, I said softly. Grandma loved the open view there when she was alive. Why go through all that trouble? Alice interjected. A public cemetery is so much more convenient. We could have the burial tomorrow. She was eager to finish the funeral arrangements quickly so she could focus on studying the jade pendant. No, I said firmly. Grandma wanted a traditional burial. I've already asked Jim to dig the grave tomorrow. Alice wanted to say something more, but her mother nodded. Let's do as Sarah says. The old lady did mention it. The next day at noon, the sun was blazing overhead. Jim, along with two young men, was digging the grave at the chosen spot when the sound of a hoe hitting something hard suddenly rang out. There's a bluestone slab down here, Jim said in surprise. I was about to step forward to take a closer look when a sudden burning sensation shot through my wrist. It was the little bear hair tie my grandmother gave me last year, which I had been wearing as a keepsake. Looking down, I saw that the rough carving of the little bear on the otherwise ordinary hair tie was now emitting a faint blue glow. A surge of warmth rushed straight from my wrist to my heart, and my vision went dark. In my ears, a voice only I could hear, ancient and weathered, echoed, "The spirit spring recognizes its master, bestowing blessings that endure. Hold kindness in your heart, and you shall see it through to the end." When I opened my eyes again, the world had changed. I could sense that within the hair tie on my wrist lay a wondrous realm, a clear spring, dark soil, and a floating ancient book. Sarah, what are you spacing out for? Alice's voice pulled me back to reality. She eyed me suspiciously. You look so pale. Did you get heatstroke? I forced a smile, maybe a little, but out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the jade pendant in her hand was still dull and lifeless. So that's it. The spiritual spring isn't in the jade pendant at all. It's in the dragon vein stone buried 3 feet underground. In my past life, I bound myself to the jade pendant only because it was the only token I had on me at the time. I touched the little bear hair tie on my wrist, my heart racing. My sister grabbed the wrong treasure, while the true opportunity is glowing warmly on my wrist. In the dead of night, I curled up on the wooden bed my grandmother used to sleep on, the bear-shaped hair tie on my wrist faintly radiating warmth. After confirming that the doors and windows were locked, I followed the method that surfaced in my mind and immersed my consciousness into the hair tie. After a dizzying spin, I found myself standing in a strange space. This is at least 3 times larger than the spiritual spring space from my previous life. Beneath my feet was a half-acre plot of black soil, the earth gleaming with a glossy sheen. In the very center, a clear spring bubbled and gurgled, surrounded by a few medicinal herbs I didn't recognize. The most amazing thing was that a yellowed ancient book was suspended in the air, with the words Spiritual Spring Secret Manual glowing faintly on its cover. I reached up to touch the ancient book, and it automatically flipped to the first page. The 3 treasures of the spiritual spring. First, water that heals wounds. Second, soil that nurtures treasures. Third, the manual that resolves doubts. As soon as my fingertip brushed over these words, the pages turned to a new section, revealing several illustrations of medicinal herbs and detailed cultivation methods. My heart leaped. In my past life, there was only the spiritual spring, but now there was also black soil capable of nurturing rare medicinal herbs and a treasure trove of knowledge. The spring water suddenly rippled, and lines of text appeared on the surface. A new master has arrived, gifted with 3 spirit seeds, which will mature in 30 days. 3 faintly glowing seeds rose from the bottom of the spring and landed in my palm. I carefully planted them in the black soil and watered them with the spirit spring. The seeds sprouted tender shoots at a visible speed, and I nearly gasped in surprise. "Sarah, what are you mumbling about in the middle of the night?" My sister's voice came from next door, accompanied by an impatient thumping on the wall. I quickly snapped out of my thoughts, my heart pounding like a drum. "Nothing, just talking in my sleep." "Crazy," Alice muttered, and I heard the sound of her turning over. Along with the faint clink of her jade pendant hitting the bed frame, moonlight streamed in through the crack in the window, and as I stared at the little bear hair tie on my wrist, the corners of my mouth lifted into an unconscious smile. The jade pendant that my sister snatched away will probably never show any reaction, while the real treasure is actually the inconspicuous little bear hair tie on my wrist. Early the next morning, I was awakened by the sharp sound of an argument in the courtyard. "Impossible, this can't be." Alice's voice was hysterical. It should have been. I tiptoed to the window and, through a crack, saw her examining the jade pendant under the sunlight, her face filled with anger and confusion. She suddenly grabbed the fruit knife on the table, made a cut on her finger, and let the blood drip onto the jade pendant. The blood droplet slid down the surface of the jade pendant, with no change at all. "Damn it," she angrily threw the jade pendant to the ground, then hurriedly picked it up to check for any cracks. "Alice, what are you doing?" Her mother pushed the door open and was startled by the blood on the floor. Alice suppressed her anger. "It's nothing, Mom. I just miss Grandma." She clenched the jade pendant, her eyes darkly sweeping past my window, and I quickly retreated into the shadows. At breakfast, Father tapped the table. "Sarah, the Lincolns came to propose a marriage yesterday, your mother, and I think it's a good match." My chopsticks paused. Lincoln's foolish son. In the previous life, his sister took the betrothal gifts and then fled the marriage, causing my family to pay double the amount. In this life, is it my turn? "Dad, I'm still young, my foot," my mother interrupted. "The Lincoln family is willing to offer $80,000 in betrothal gifts, enough to buy a small apartment in the county town for your brother." Alice added fuel to the fire on the side. "The Lincoln family has such good conditions, although their son is a bit, but that's nothing. Sarah will live a life of ease once she marries into their family." I lowered my head and focused on eating, hiding the coldness in my eyes. In my past life, after she ran away from the marriage, it was I who worked day and night doing handicrafts to repay her debts. In this life, she can't wait to push me into the fire. "I'll think about it," I said softly. "Think about what?" "There's nothing to think about." Father slammed the table. "It's settled." After the meal, I slipped out of the house under the pretense of visiting Grandma's grave. At the grave on the back hill, I knelt on the fresh soil and whispered, "Grandma, I will make good use of the treasure you gave me." The hair tie on my wrist felt slightly warm, as if responding. While descending the mountain, I heard a panicked cry for help. Following the sound, I saw the wife of Williams, the wealthiest man in the eastern part of the village, running frantically with a child in her arms. The child's face was bluish-purple, and his limbs were convulsing. My little treasure was bitten by a venomous snake. "Help!" the woman cried out. The surrounding villagers gathered around but were at a loss for what to do. A page from the Spiritual Spring Manual, the section on detoxification, suddenly flashed through my mind. I rushed forward in a few quick steps. "Let me take a look." The child was about 5 or 6 years old, with 2 small fang marks on his calf, the surrounding area already blackened. Pretending to examine the injury, I discreetly drew a drop of spiritual spring water from my space and dripped it onto the wound. "I need herbs." I looked up and said to Mrs. Williams, "I know there's a kind of herb on the back mountain that can detoxify." "It's too late. The town hospital is an hour away." Mrs. Williams was crying so hard she nearly fainted. "Trust me," I said firmly, while secretly massaging the child's wound with spiritual spring water. Black blood slowly oozed out, and the child's breathing became somewhat steadier. Under the astonished gazes of everyone, I continued, "Lay him flat first. I'll go gather some herbs." After saying that, I ran to a secluded spot and quickly entered the space to pick a handful of freshly grown detoxifying herbs. Returning to the child's side, I chewed the herbs and applied them to the wound, then secretly mixed in a few drops of spiritual spring water and fed it to him. In less than 10 minutes, the child's complexion turned rosy, and he opened his eyes. "Amazing!" exclaimed the surrounding villagers. Mrs. Williams hugged me tightly. "Sarah, you are the great benefactor of our family." She pulled a stack of money from her bag and handed it to me. "Please accept this token of our gratitude." Unable to refuse, I had no choice but to accept it. I counted it. It was a full 5,000 yuan. In my previous life, the first person I saved was a wealthy merchant from the city, but this time it was a child from the same village. The feeling was completely different. "When did Sarah learn medicine?" a villager asked curiously. "Grandma taught me some folk remedies. Before she passed away, I replied with a smile, catching a glimpse of Alice standing at the edge of the crowd, her expression shifting uncertainly. Back home, I hid the money and left only $500 on the table. Dad, Mom, this is a thank you gift from the Williams family. His eyes lit up, and he immediately grabbed the money and started counting it. Alice leaned in. Sarah, when did you learn how to heal? Grandma never taught us any of this. You're always running around outside, of course. You wouldn't know, I replied calmly, deliberately showing off the little bear hair tie on my wrist. Grandma only taught me, and she even left this hair tie especially for me. Alice's pupils contracted, and she reached up to grab my hair tie. Let me see it. I nimbly dodged. Sister, don't you already have the jade pendant? Let me keep this worthless little trinket. Her face turned pale and then flushed, and she suddenly put on a smile. Sarah, I'll help you persuade Mom and Dad about the Lincoln family matter. No need, I said, looking straight into her eyes. I'll handle my own affairs. Just then, the sound of a car engine came from outside the courtyard gate. A tall figure in military uniform stepped out of the jeep and looked toward our yard. Excuse me, is this David Cooper's home? The officer's voice was clear and firm. Our whole family was stunned. Father was the first to react, jogging up to greet him. Good day, sir, I am David Cooper. What can I do for you? I'm Charles from the military District Research Office. The officer showed his ID. I'm here in the village to conduct a folklore survey. The village recommended that the elders in your family have a deep understanding of local traditions. His words abruptly stopped as his gaze fell on me, a flicker of barely noticeable shock flashing in his eyes. My heart nearly stopped. Charles, the officer I fell in love with in my past life but never got to marry. How could he appear here ahead of time? What sent even more chills down my spine was that Alice had already sashayed forward, extending her hand and cooing, Hello, Officer Charles, I'm Alice, and this is my sister Sarah. Our grandmother just passed away, but we're quite familiar with local customs and can help. She deliberately shook the jade pendant in her hand, and sure enough, Charles's gaze was drawn to it. I held my breath. Could he have been reborn as well? Or perhaps, Charles quickly regained his composure and politely shook hands with each of us when his fingertips touched my palm. I distinctly felt him gently hook my finger, just like the secret signal we used on dates in our past life. Alice didn't notice this small gesture. She was busy showing off the unresponsive jade pendant. Officer Charles, this is an ancient jade passed down from my grandmother. It's said to be 200 years old. I took a step back, watching Charles's perfect poker face and Alice's earnest performance, and suddenly understood something. In this game of rebirth, there might be more players than just the two of us sisters. In the faint light of dawn, I crouched beside the black soil in the space, carefully picking the fully grown detoxifying herbs. In just 3 days, those few seeds had grown into lush medicinal bushes, with dewdrops from the spiritual spring still glistening on the leaves. According to the secret manual, these should fetch a good price, I said, neatly arranging the herbs into the prepared bamboo basket and covering them with ordinary wild grass as a disguise. As I exited the space, the bear hair tie on my wrist felt slightly warm, as if reminding me to be cautious. Ever since discovering the space, I've always felt that this hair tie has a certain spirituality, more alive than the jade pendant from my past life. The courtyard was quiet, and my family was still asleep. I tiptoed out of the house and headed toward the town's market. The morning market was already bustling with activity. I found an inconspicuous corner, spread out a coarse cloth, laid out a few detoxifying herbs, and used charcoal to write specializes in treating snake and insect bites on a broken wooden board. Little girl, are these herbs genuine? An old hunter with a wrinkled face crouched down and skeptically poked at my herbs. Take a bite of the leaf and try it. I confidently handed him one, bitter at first, then sweet. That's how all genuine detoxifying herbs taste. The old hunter chewed on the leaf, his eyes lighting up. This is truly a wild mountain herb. How much is it? 50 yuan per plant. So expensive. He widened his eyes in surprise. I lowered my voice. This is a 30-year-old heirloom variety, almost extinct in the mountains now. Just the day before yesterday, I used it to save baby from the Williams family. The old hunter hesitated for a moment before finally pulling out 2 crumpled bills. Give me 4 plants. Last week, my brother was bitten by a 5-step snake and is still lying in the hospital. Not long after opening, most of my herbs had already been sold. Just as I was counting my earnings, a shadow fell over my stall. I'll take all of these herbs. The clear, bright male voice made my heart skip a beat. I looked up and met Charles's sharp, eagle-like eyes. He was dressed in casual clothes today, yet he still couldn't hide the upright and imposing demeanor of a soldier. Commander Charles, you also know about medicinal herbs. I forced myself to stay calm, but my fingers unconsciously twisted the Hem of my clothes. In my previous life, we first met at the county hospital. He was hospitalized due to a training injury, and I was there to sell mountain products. He didn't appear in my life that early back then. Charles crouched down, his fingertips gently brushing over the herb leaves, purple-backed honeysuckle, with a net-like vein pattern. This is a characteristic of the old wild variety. He looked up and met my eyes directly. This variety was almost extinct 20 years ago. Where did you gather it from, Miss Cooper? A cold sweat broke out on my back. How could he know so clearly? In his previous life, he clearly knew nothing about medicinal herbs. There's a hidden valley in the back mountain. My grandmother took me there once. I casually made up while carefully observing his expression. A flicker of an elusive emotion passed through Charles's eyes, and the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Is that so? Could Miss Cooper lead the way another day? I'm quite interested in rare plants. Of course, I pretended to agree while quickly packing up my stall, but I have to head back today. There are matters to attend to at home. He held down my bamboo basket. Didn't you say you'd sell it all to me? As he spoke, he pulled out 1,000 yuan bills from his wallet. 1,000. Is that enough? I widened my eyes. These herbs are worth at most 300 on the market. That's too much. I took 2 bills back and handed them to him. 800 is enough. Charles suddenly grabbed my wrist, right on the little bare hair tie. We both jolted, a flicker of shock passing through his eyes before he quickly regained his composure. Your hair tie is quite special. I abruptly pulled my hand back, my heart pounding like a drum. He felt it. He must have felt the power of the spirit spring. My grandmother left it to me. I hurriedly wrapped up the remaining herbs and handed them to him. Payment and goods settled. I'll be on my way. After turning around and taking a few steps, a familiar voice came from behind. Officer Charles. What a coincidence. I knew it was Alice without even turning around. She was wearing a tight red top today, with her hair meticulously styled. Clearly, she had put in a lot of effort to dress up. Miss Cooper. Charles's voice was polite but distant. I quickened my pace to leave, yet I could still hear Alice's affected laughter. Officer Charles likes herbs. My little sister is so naive. She dares to sell wild grass she randomly picked for money. Turning the corner, I let out a long sigh of relief. Charles's unusual behavior left me unsettled. The way he looked at me felt all too familiar, as if he had known me all along. Back home, I hid the money I had earned in a secret compartment under the bed. This money is enough for an emergency, but it's far from enough to completely escape the Lincoln family's forced marriage. At lunch, my father tapped the edge of his bowl and announced, "The Lincoln family will bring the betrothal gifts tomorrow, the 8th day of next month is an auspicious day, so let's hold the wedding then." My chopsticks trembled, and a piece of tofu fell onto the table. Dad, Shut up, Father glared. The betrothal gifts have been accepted. You have no say in this. Alice snickered on the side, pretending to be sympathetic. Sarah, women have to get married eventually. The Lincoln family is well off. Don't be ungrateful. I clenched my fists, my nails digging deep into my palms. Suddenly, a thought flashed through my mind. The Williams family, I saved their child once. Perhaps, Dad, Mom, I'm going to the Williams house. I put down my bowl and chopsticks and stood up. Mrs. Williams said yesterday that she wanted to thank me and give me something. Upon hearing the words give something, my father's expression softened slightly. Go ahead, but don't take too long. The Williams house was the most impressive 2-story building in the village. I knocked on the door and explained my reason for coming. Mrs. Williams warmly welcomed me inside. Sarah, the little one is completely better. You are truly our family's savior. She took my hand and sat me down, then ordered the servant to bring some fruit. Mrs. Williams, actually, I have a favor to ask. I hesitated before speaking. My family has accepted the betrothal gift from the Lincoln family's foolish son and is forcing me to marry him next month. Mrs. Williams's face changed. What? That violent fool from the Lincoln family? Have your parents lost their minds? I lowered my head, pretending to wipe away tears. I want to go to the county town to work and repay the betrothal money, but my parents won't allow it. What a sin. Mrs. Williams slammed the table and stood up. All right, I'll talk to your father and have you come work as our family doctor. I'll pay you $3,000 a month. As for the Lincoln family, I'll have your Uncle Williams talk to them. I was secretly delighted but put on an even more pitiful expression. But my father has already taken the money. How much? 80,000, right? Mrs. Williams waved her hand grandly. Our Williams family will cover the cost first. With your medical skills, you can't waste them at the Lincoln family. When I left the Williams house, I had $5,000 in deposit from Mrs. Williams tucked in my pocket, and my steps felt much lighter. With the Williams family as a backup, I could at least buy some time. As night fell, I tossed and turned in bed. Charles's Unusual behavior, Alice's deliberate approach, and that all-too-convenient folk research, all of it left me unsettled. Entering the spirit spring space, I scooped up a handful of spring water and drank it. The cool liquid slid down my throat, bringing a moment of clarity. Suddenly, ripples formed on the water's surface, gradually revealing a blurry image. Alice sneaked into my room furtively, rummaging through my things. The scene shifted, showing her conspiring with a hunched figure in the woods. The figure turned around. It was the notorious old bachelor Tom from the village, I gasped, and the scene suddenly shifted to first-person view. I was trapped in a dim alley, with Tom sneering as he approached, muttering, "What's done cannot be undone." The water surface returned to calm, and I trembled as I withdrew from the space. Is this a premonition of the future? My sister actually wants to harm me with such despicable means. The moonlight outside the window was like water, and as I rubbed the little bear hair tie on my wrist, I made up my mind. Since my sister has already made a move, I no longer need to hold back. The next morning, I casually said to my mother, "Mom, I dreamed of Grandma last night. She told me that the hair tie on my wrist is a family heirloom and that I should take good care of it." "Nonsense," my mother frowned. "That's just a $2 trinket from a street stall." Alice was combing her hair, and upon hearing this, her hand trembled, and the comb fell to the ground. She stared intently at my hair tie, her eyes gleaming with greed and suspicion. "Sis, how's your jade pendant?" I asked deliberately. "Grandma said in a dream that the family heirloom needs sincerity to activate." Alice's face turned pale, and the jade pendant in her hand clattered onto the table. She hurriedly picked it up to check, only to find a fine crack on the surface of the jade pendant. She pointed at me, her finger trembling. "What do you know?" I blinked innocently. "I was just repeating Grandma's dream. Why are you so worked up, sis?" Our parents looked at us, puzzled by the sisters' confrontation. Not understanding what was going on, I seized the moment to stand up. "Mrs. Williams asked me to go see her mother-in-law for her rheumatism today, so don't wait for me for lunch." Stepping out of the courtyard gate, I let out a long sigh of relief. "This is just the beginning, Alice. We'll settle the score slowly for the time you pushed me down the stairs an hour past life." The alley in the vision is located at the eastern end of the village, the only way to the old well, flanked by abandoned adobe houses, usually deserted. I stood at the mouth of the alley, sizing up the place that would become the starting point of my nightmare in the future. The afternoon sun illuminated the alley brightly, a stark contrast to the gloomy and dim scene from my premonitory dream. "I need to prepare in advance," I murmured to myself, turning and heading toward the back hill. The Spiritual Spring Secret Manual records a special herb, the bee-attracting grass. The smoke from burning this grass can attract wild bees within a 1-mile radius, but it is harmless to humans. I cultivated 3 plants in my space, and now they've come in handy. After gathering the herbs, I made a detour to old Bachelor Tom's rundown yard. Through the fence, I saw him sharpening a machete while humming a vulgar tune. I fought back my disgust and quietly sprinkled a special powder on his drying coat. This was pollen soaked in a spiritual spring, which had an extremely strong attraction for bees. After doing this, I went to the Williams house. Mrs. Williams was hanging clothes in the yard and waved warmly when she saw me. "Sarah, you came at just the right time. I just made some white fungus soup." "Mrs. Williams, I'd like to ask you a favor," I whispered, lowering my voice. "After sunset tonight, could you and Uncle Williams pretend to pass by that old alley in the east of the village? I'm worried someone might mean me harm." Mrs. Williams' face suddenly changed. "Who would dare?" "I'm not sure yet." I pretended to hesitate. "It might be Tom from the village. He's been watching me a lot lately. That old scoundrel." Mrs. Williams fumed, her chest heaving with anger. "Don't worry, Uncle Williams and I will definitely go. We'll even call a few neighbors. Let's see who dares lay a finger on you." After leaving the Williams house, I visited a few other neighbors with whom I usually have good relations, using the same excuse to lay the groundwork. Finally, I tucked a few stalks of fireweed into the cracks of the old alley walls, making sure they would dry out before sunset and be easy to ignite. Everything was set, and all that was left was to wait for the fish to take the bait. During dinner, Alice was unusually attentive, constantly serving me more food. "Sarah, eat more. You've lost weight recently." I feigned gratitude with a smile. But under the table, my foot nudged the small knife hidden in my boot. "Tonight, I will make sure my sister pays the first price for the sins of her past life." "Sarah, come with me to fetch water from the old well tonight," Alice suggested casually. "They say the water is at its sweetest this evening." I looked up at her. Her eyes gleamed with malice, yet a sickly sweet smile played on her lips. In my previous life, I was too quick to trust her, which led to my downfall and the tragic end of falling from a building. "All right," I agreed readily, watching the gleam of Triumph flashed in her eyes. As night fell, I excused myself to use the restroom and slipped out of the house early, heading straight for the old alley. The moonlight, clear as water, cast a pale glow on the earthen walls. I quickly lit the prearranged bee-attracting herbs and then hid in the shadows behind a broken wall. The smoke curled upward, carrying a faint, sweet fragrance. In less than 10 minutes, a buzzing sound came from the distance, growing closer and closer, covering my nose and mouth. I watched as a dense swarm of bees followed the smoke, hovering in the air above the alley. "Sarah, where are you?" Alice's voice came from the entrance of the alley. Feigning concern, I held my breath, watching her poke her head around as she entered the alley, followed by the sneaky Tom. Under the moonlight, Tom's wrinkled face glistened with oil, his eyes constantly darting toward Alice's rear. "Didn't you agree to lure her here?" Tom whispered, his hand already restlessly resting on Alice's shoulder. Alice slapped his hand away in disgust. "What's the rush? That little wretch must be nearby." She raised her voice. "Sarah, stop hiding. I see you." Just then, the swarm of bees detected the pollen on Tom and swooped toward him like a black whirlwind. "Ah, what the hell?" Tom screamed, frantically slapping at his head and face. Alice turned around in shock, and before she could react, a few wild bees flew toward her as well. "Get away." "Ah, my face!" Alice screamed, flailing her arms wildly, her carefully styled bun coming undone, making her look like a madwoman. I seized the moment to rush out from my hiding spot, pretending to be panicked. "Sis, Uncle Tom, what happened to you?" Tom was already covered in red welts, his face swollen like a pig's head, and his clothes were torn and disheveled. Alice was in slightly better condition, but several large bumps had swollen on her forehead and neck, and her meticulously applied makeup was smeared into a mess. "Help, there's a swarm of bees." Alice saw me, a flicker of guilt flashing in her eyes, quickly replaced by fear. I pretended to be scared and stepped back. "I'll go get help." With that, I turned and ran, only to accidentally bump into Mrs. Williams and her group, who had rushed over upon hearing the commotion at the entrance of the alley. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Mrs. Williams held a kerosene lamp, followed by 5 or 6 villagers. "Mrs. Williams, help my sister and Uncle Tom. They're being swarmed by bees." I frantically pointed toward the alley. The villagers rushed into the alley with torches, and the sight before them left them stunned. Tom was rolling on the ground with his clothes in disarray, while Alice was patting at non-existent bees in a disheveled state, cursing incessantly. "Well, isn't this the Cooper girl and Tom?" Uncle Williams raised an eyebrow meaningfully. "What are a lone man and woman doing in this dark alley late at night?" Alice's face turned pale. I was looking for my sister." "Looking for me?" I blinked innocently. "But didn't you say you were going to fetch water from the old well? What brings you here? And with Uncle Tom too?" The villagers exchanged suggestive glances. Tom tried to defend himself, but as soon as he opened his mouth, he spat out a mouthful of blood-tinged saliva. A bee had stung his tongue. "Let's help him first," Mrs. Williams said, suppressing a laugh as she took charge. "We need to treat Tom quickly. Bee venom is no joke." On the way back to the village, Alice limped behind me, her eyes filled with hatred as if she wanted to tear me apart. As we passed by a shadowy spot, she suddenly grabbed my wrist, her nails digging deep into my flesh. "It was you," she whispered through gritted teeth. "You knew we would be there." I gently pulled my hand away and put on a puzzled expression. "Sis, what are you talking about? Didn't you ask me to fetch water from the old well? I was wondering why you went to that alley and even with Uncle Tom." "Shut up," she snapped sharply, causing the villagers ahead to turn and look. Mrs. Williams quickly stepped forward, shielding me. "Alice, why are you yelling at Sarah? If it weren't for her calling us tonight, who knows what would have happened to you and Tom?" Alice opened her mouth but eventually closed it under the villagers' scornful gazes, though the resentment in her eyes remained undiminished. Back home, my parents were startled by Alice's disheveled appearance after hearing what happened. Father's face turned ashen. "You, a young lady, hanging out with Tom late at night, have you no shame?" "Dad, I was framed," Alice cried out, pointing at me. "She set me up." Mother frowned. "How did Sarah set you up? Didn't you say you were going to fetch water yourself?" I squeezed out 2 tears at the right moment. "Sis, I know you don't like me, but you can't wrong me like this." That night, Alice was punished by kneeling in front of the ancestral tablets to reflect on her actions, while I lay in bed, stroking the little bare hair tie on my wrist, feeling a surge of vengeful satisfaction. This is just the beginning, sister. Early the next morning, the village was already buzzing with the scandalous affair between Alice and Tom. When I went to fetch water from the well, a few women deliberately raised their voices. "I heard that Alice and Tom were caught in the alley last night. Tsk tisk. They always acted so high and mighty, but it turns out they're into this kind of thing. I heard they were even attacked by a swarm of bees. Must be karma for all the wicked things they've done." I lowered my head and walked quickly past, but I didn't feel the satisfaction I had imagined. In my past life, my sister caused my tragic death. This revenge is not excessive, but why do I feel so empty inside? Sarah, a deep male voice came from behind. I turned around and saw Charles standing in the morning light, his military uniform crisp and his gaze sharp. Chief Charles, I forced a smile, coming for an inspection this early. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. I heard about what happened last night. My heart tightened, and I gripped the handle of the bucket. I'm glad you're okay, he said suddenly, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Some people have ill intentions, they'll reap what they sow sooner or later. I looked up in surprise, just in time to catch a fleeting tenderness in his eyes. In that moment, I almost blurted out to ask if he had also been reborn. But reason ultimately prevailed. Thank you for your concern, I said softly, preparing to leave, but he handed me a small cloth pouch. This is for you. Seeing my hesitation, he added, it's some medicine for external injuries. I heard your sister was stunned last night. I took the cloth bag, and the moment our fingertips touched, the bare hair tie suddenly became scalding hot, so hot that I almost cried out. Charles seemed to sense something too, abruptly pulling his hand back, a flicker of shock in his eyes. I have something to do. I should go now, he said hurriedly, his steps quicker than usual. When I got home, I opened the cloth bag. Inside were a few packets of Army specialized ointment, and a note folded into a square. Unfolding it, there was only one line written, be careful with the jade pendant. It's strange. My heart skipped a beat. Charles knows about the jade pendant, and he took the initiative to warn me. Does that mean, just as I was pondering, Alice suddenly pushed the door open and entered, her eyes still swollen, clearly having cried all night. She immediately spotted the ointment and the note on the table. What is this? She snatched the note, and her expression changed drastically after reading it. Why did Officer Charles write this to you? What's your relationship? I calmly took back the note. He was just concerned about your sting injury. Bullshit, she screamed. He was clearly warning you about the jade pendant. She suddenly grabbed my wrist, staring intently at the bare hair tie. Did you tell him something? What's the secret behind this damn hair tie? Sis, you're hurting me. I tried to break free, but she only gripped me tighter. Alice, what's gotten into you? Mother rushed over upon hearing the commotion and scolded sharply at the sight. Alice let go of me, pointing and crying, Mom, Sarah seduced Commander Charles, and she's spreading rumors that Tom and I are involved. She's nothing but trouble. Mother looked at us sisters with suspicion and finally sighed. Sarah, your sister's reputation is damaged now, and the family isn't at peace. Maybe you should go stay at the old house at the village entrance for a few days. Come back after things settle down. My heart sank, but I knew this was Alice's revenge. But on second thought, moving out might make it more convenient for me to use the spiritual spring space. All right, I replied calmly, turning to pack my simple belongings. Alice stood triumphantly to the side, whispering, Don't think you've won. I know there's something off about you, and I'll uncover your secret sooner or later. I stopped what I was doing and looked her straight in the eyes. Sis, Grandma came to me in a dream and said, greed will make a snake try to swallow an elephant. Some things just can't be forced. Her face suddenly changed, and the jade pendant she always held in her hand fell to the ground with a crack, gaining another fissure. As I walked out of the house carrying my luggage, I glanced back at the old home I had lived in for 20 years. This time, I won't let myself be trampled on anymore. The old house at the village entrance, though shabby, is the starting point of my new life. The little bare hair tie on my wrist feels slightly warm, as if giving me encouragement. I take a deep breath and stride toward the new battlefield. The old house at the village entrance is even more dilapidated than I imagined. The thatch on the roof was sparse, and the cobwebs in the corner hung like gauze curtains. After putting down my luggage, the first thing I did was check if the doors and windows were secure. At least it's better than sharing a room with Alice, I muttered to myself, sweeping the dust off the floor with a broom. Once everything was tidied up, I locked the door and eagerly entered the spirit spring space. 3 days away, and the herbs on the black soil have grown taller, yet the water level of the spirit spring has dropped slightly compared to last time. I crouched by the spring and noticed the dark circles under my eyes reflected clearly on the water's surface. Did the precognition consume the spirit spring's energy? I whispered, and the water rippled gently. As if in response, the spirit spring manual automatically turned to a new page, where words appeared. To foresee the future, one defies the natural order and must replenish it with spiritual energy. I frowned, pondering the meaning of these words. It seems that the ability of foresight isn't unlimited. Each use consumes spiritual spring energy. This explains why I've been feeling so exhausted lately. I need to find a way to replenish my spiritual energy, I murmured to myself, my gaze falling on a small blank space at the edge of the black soil. According to the ancient texts, cultivating rare plants and harvesting their yields can nourish the spiritual spring in return. In the days that followed, I spent my days running errands around town, While dedicating my nights to studying the spiritual spring secret texts through Mrs. Williams' connections, I rented a small stall at the county's medicinal herb market, specializing in selling rare herbs cultivated by the spiritual spring. The income was far better than I had imagined, and I managed to save nearly 10,000 yuan in less than 2 weeks. One evening, I was cultivating a new variety in the greenhouse, the moonlight orchid. This orchid was only recorded in ancient texts and had long been extinct in reality. Its petals are semi-transparent and emit a subtle fragrance under moonlight, making it an excellent raw material for high-end perfumes. "Sarah, are you home?" Mrs. Williams' voice came from outside the yard. I quickly stepped out of the space, brushed the dirt off my clothes, and went to open the door. Behind Mrs. Williams stood a middle-aged man in a well-tailored suit, clearly a city dweller. "This is Manager Mark from the county's perfume factory," Mrs. Williams introduced. "He saw the sachet you gave me and insisted on meeting you." Manager Mark enthusiastically extended his hand. "Miss Cooper, the spices you used in that sachet are so unique. Our factory is willing to buy the formula at a high price." A thought crossed my mind, but I pretended to hesitate and said, "This is a family secret recipe. My grandmother made me promise on her deathbed not to share it with anyone." I understand. Manager Mark quickly replied, "But could you supply the spices regularly? We can negotiate the price." And so, under the condition of supplying 2 pounds of the family's secret spice blend each month, I signed my first business contract, with an advance payment of 5,000 yuan. After seeing Manager Mark off, Mrs. Williams winked at me and said, "Sarah, you're going to make a fortune." I slipped a red envelope to Mrs. Williams. "Thanks to your referral." Mrs. Williams reluctantly accepted the envelope and lowered her voice. "By the way, your sister has been hanging around that Officer Charles a lot lately. The village is full of gossip." My fingers trembled slightly, but I quickly regained my composure. "Her affairs have nothing to do with me. You'd better be careful," Mrs. Williams sighed. "Yesterday, at the entrance of the village committee, I overheard her telling the village chief that you've been possessed by an evil spirit and that's why you suddenly know medicine." After seeing Mrs. Williams off, I stood in the yard, lost in thought. Alice is indeed relentless. She's determined to ruin my reputation completely. The night breeze blew by, bringing a slight chill. I rubbed the little bare hair tie on my wrist, pondering my next move. Early the next morning, I deliberately chose the time when the most villagers were around to fetch water from the well. Several women were gossiping about Alice and Charles's scandal. When they saw me, they immediately gathered around. "Sarah, I heard you can ward off evil spirits. My little one keeps crying at night. Miss Sarah, I've been having this back pain." I smiled in response and took the opportunity to say loudly, "Aunties, all my skills were taught to me by Grandma in a dream. She said our village will face a flash flood this year and asked me to remind everyone to prepare in advance." The crowd fell silent instantly, and an old man scoffed. "What nonsense is this little girl talking about? How can there be a flash flood in this dry season?" I didn't argue, just said mysteriously, "Grandma said that 3 days from now, at dusk, if dark clouds gather over the western mountain like a lid, that will be the sign." 3 days later, in the evening, just as I had predicted, rare dark clouds gathered over the western mountain, shaped like an overturned pot. The villagers became restless and rushed over to ask me for details. Grandma said that a few households in the low-lying areas need to move away temporarily. I pointed toward the west end of the village, especially the families of Jim, Williams, and James. "They're in the most danger." Most of the villagers were skeptical, but the 3 families I had named, having witnessed my accuracy before, reluctantly packed their valuables and moved to stay with relatives. That night at midnight, heavy rain poured down, and a flash flood indeed broke out. The flood washed away 5 houses at the western end of the village, including the homes of Jim and the other 2 families. Due to the early evacuation, there were no casualties. At daybreak, I was awakened by the clamor of the villagers. I opened the door to see a crowd gathered outside the courtyard, with several elderly leaders kneeling as soon as they saw me. "Miss you is truly a living deity, thanks to your reminder, or else my whole family would have been gone. From now on, we'll believe whatever you say." I quickly helped the elderly up, but there was no joy in my heart. Using precognition to save people is certainly good, but every time it's used, the water level in the spirit spring noticeably drops. This morning, when I checked, the spring water was already only half full. At the back of the crowd, I caught a glimpse of Alice's distorted face and Charles's thoughtful expression. Alice glared at me with gritted teeth, while Charles, his gaze was so complex I couldn't read it. After the villagers had dispersed, Charles remained. "Miss Cooper, may I have a word in private?" He stood tall in his military uniform, his tone formal, yet his eyes held a familiar warmth. I led him inside and poured a cup of plain tea. As he took the teacup, his fingers brushed against mine, intentionally or not, sending an electric jolt that nearly made me let go. Your grandmother's dream message was very accurate. He got straight to the point, his eyes gleaming with curiosity, so accurate it hardly seems like a dream. My heart raced, but I forced myself to stay calm. I suppose you don't believe in such things, do you, Captain Charles? I believe in facts, he said, lowering his voice as he set down his teacup. For example, the fact of reincarnation. My teacup slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor, splashing hot water onto my pants. Could it be, as I suspected? Is he also one? Charles bent down to pick up the teacup and took the opportunity to whisper in my ear, "Don't worry, I'm just like you. I remember everything from our past life." I trembled all over, unsure whether it was from fear or excitement. In our past life, Charles was the same, always leaning in close to whisper in my ear, his warm breath brushing against the side of my neck. Prove it to me. I suppressed my emotions and looked straight into his eyes. Charles took a small notebook from his military uniform pocket, opened it to a page, and handed it to me. On it was written a line, "Top floor of the Pearl Hotel, moonlight and promises." My eyes instantly welled up with tears. That was the place where he proposed to me in our previous life. At the time, he said, "With the moonlight as witness, in this life and the next, it will only be you, Sarah." He reached out to wipe my tears but suddenly pulled his hand back just before touching my cheek, his expression shifting abruptly. "Someone's coming." The courtyard gate was pushed open roughly, and Alice's sharp voice rang out, "Commander Charles, you're here. The village is looking for you to attend a meeting." Charles quickly regained his military posture and strode out of the room. "Comrade Alice, please lead the way." Alice looked at me and Charles with suspicion, when suddenly the jade pendant in her hand glowed. A faint green light, fleeting but unmistakable. We all saw it. Charles's face changed, and he quickly walked away. Alice, as if discovering a new world, stared intently at the jade pendant, then at Charles's retreating figure, her eyes gleaming with a wild light. "So that's how it is," she murmured, then glared at me fiercely. "Captain Charles is mine. Don't you dare try to take him." I closed the door and slowly slid down to the floor, leaning my back against it. The amount of information today was overwhelming. Charles is also a reincarnator, and Alice's jade pendant reacts to Charles. The bear-shaped hair tie on my wrist suddenly grew hot. I entered the space to check, and the sight before me made my heart tighten. The spiritual spring's water level had dropped again, and this time, a small grayish-white area appeared at the edge of the black soil, as if contaminated by something. The secret tome automatically opened, revealing a warning. "The evil jade awakens. The spiritual spring is disturbed. Twin forces oppose each other. Proceed with caution. Evil jade, are you?" Referring to Alice's jade pendant, I reached up to touch the text, but it dissipated, replaced by a blurry image. Charles, covered in blood, lying in a dark space with a dagger plunged into his chest. I abruptly withdrew from the space, my back drenched in cold sweat. Is this a fragment of the future? Is Charles in danger? Just as I was feeling unsettled, the courtyard gate was knocked on again. It was Mrs. Williams this time, her face deathly pale. "Sarah, quick, Captain Charles's comrade was injured during training on the back mountain, and he's bleeding heavily. The town hospital is too far away." Without a second thought, I grabbed the medical kit and ran after Mrs. Williams. On the back hillside, a group of soldiers had gathered. In the middle lay a young soldier with a branch stuck in his thigh, and half of his pant leg was soaked in blood. Charles was directing the first aid efforts. When he saw me, a flicker of delight crossed his eyes. "Miss Cooper knows medicine. Let her take a look." I examined the wound. The branch had pierced a major artery, and ordinary treatment wouldn't stop the bleeding. I pretended to fetch medicine from the medical kit but secretly let a drop of spiritual spring water fall onto the wound. "The branch needs to be surgically removed immediately," I said to Charles, looking up, "but for now, we can use my special medicine to stop the bleeding." The miraculous spring water took effect very quickly, and the bleeding soon stopped. The military doctors were astonished, while Charles gave me a deep look, as if to say, "I know what you used." After the soldier was carried away on a stretcher, Charles deliberately stayed behind and, when no one was looking, slipped me a note, "Meet me at the usual place at midnight tonight." I clutched the note tightly, my heart pounding like a drum. The old place, the small riverbank where we used to meet for dates in our past life, he remembers it too. After returning to my room, I was just about to rest for a while to prepare for the evening meeting when the space suddenly pulled me in on its own. The spiritual spring churned violently, and a new scene emerged on the water's surface. Alice sneaked into Charles's temporary dormitory and poured some kind of powder into his water bottle. The scene shifts. Charles drinks the water and collapses to the ground. Alice presses the jade pendant against his forehead, and it emits an eerie green light. I withdraw from the space, my entire body icy cold. Tonight's date is dangerous, I must warn Charles. As midnight approaches, I quietly make my way toward the small river, carrying a small knife and the spiritual spring antidote. The moonlight, like water, bathed the path in a silvery glow. In the distance, a tall figure was already waiting under the willow tree by the river. I quickened my pace, but when I was still about 10 meters away, I saw another figure emerge from behind the tree. It was Alice. She was holding something shiny in her hand. Quietly approaching Charles, who had his back turned to her. "Charles, watch out behind you," I screamed, rushing forward desperately. "Charles, watch out behind you." My scream pierced the night sky. Charles reacted swiftly, sidestepping to dodge Alice's sneak attack. Under the moonlight, the scissors in her hand glinted coldly. "Alice, what are you doing?" Charles shouted sternly, his military authority instantly on full display. Seeing that her sneak attack had failed, Alice actually knelt down. Directly, holding the jade pendant with both hands above her head. "Commander Charles, please touch this jade pendant, it needs your power." I rushed to Charles's side, watching Alice warily. Her gaze was unnervingly fervent, with a strange smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Are you insane?" I tried to pull her up, sneaking up on someone with scissors in the middle of the night. "Do you want to go to jail?" Alice shook off my hand, her eyes fixed only on Charles. "Officer Charles, this jade pendant is a treasure, but it only responds to you. Please, just touch it." Charles frowned at me, his eyes full of inquiry. I shook my head almost imperceptibly, although I didn't know what Alice was up to. It was definitely nothing good. "Comrade Alice, please calm down." Charles took a step back, maintaining a safe distance. "If there's an issue, we can discuss it at the village committee tomorrow. For now, please go home." Alice's expression twisted instantly. She leaped up abruptly. Scissors pointed straight at my throat. "It's all you. You stole my chance, in my past life, and now again in this one." Charles stepped forward in a flash, effortlessly disarmed her, and pinned her hands behind her back. "What did you just say? A past life?" Alice suddenly realized she had let the secret slip, her face turning deathly pale. She struggled desperately. "Let me go. I didn't say anything about a past life. You misheard." I picked up the jade pendant that had fallen to the ground. It felt icy cold to the touch, as if I were holding a block of ice. What's even more bizarre is that a faint, dark green light seemed to seep through the cracks on the surface of the jade pendant. "This jade pendant is strange," I said, handing it to Charles. "Look at these cracks." As soon as Charles touched the jade pendant, a sudden change occurred. It began to vibrate violently, emitting a piercing shriek, and the green light from the cracks intensified. Seizing the opportunity, Alice broke free, snatched the jade pendant back, and turned to run, quickly disappearing into the night. Charles and I looked at each other. "Has she also been reborn?" Charles whispered, his eyes filled with shock. I nodded, suddenly feeling dizzy and almost losing my balance. Charles quickly steadied me. "What's wrong?" "It's nothing. Probably just a scare." I forced a smile, not mentioning the anomaly in the spiritual spring space. The most important thing now was to figure out Charles's identity. "Do you really remember your past life?" Charles led me to sit by the riverbank. Moonlight spilled over his sharply defined profile, tracing a silver outline. He gently held my hand, his palm warm and dry. "I remember everything," he said in a low voice. "I remember our first meeting at the county hospital, how you healed my leg injury, and how I proposed to you." His fingers brushed over the bare hair tie on my wrist. "I remember this too. In our past life, it was a jade pendant, right?" My eyes welled up, and tears flowed uncontrollably. So many lonely nights. I wished he could be reborn too, now that the dream has come true. "I don't know what to say." Charles gently wiped away my tears. "I've been looking for you ever since I was reborn. I applied to do research in this village because I remembered you saying your hometown was here, but in our previous life, we met 3 years later," I said, puzzled. "The timeline has changed," Charles said with a serious expression. "After I was reborn, I found that many things were different from our previous life. The strangest part is that my military rank is 2 levels higher than it was at the same time in the past, as if someone paved the way for me in advance." My heart skipped a beat. Could it be that more than just the 3 of us were reborn? Who else is secretly altering fate? Charles, Alice's jade pendant. It's really eerie. Charles frowned deeply. "The moment I touched it just now, some strange images suddenly flashed through my mind. An ancient tomb and a blood-red book." I shuddered. This description is so similar to the evil jade warned about in the Spirit Spring Secret Codex. Charles suddenly held me tightly, his grip so strong it almost took my breath away. "Sarah, in this lifetime, I will never let anyone hurt you, especially not your sister." Leaning against his firm chest, listening to his steady heartbeat, I suddenly felt that no difficulty was too great to overcome as long as we have each other. "We can face any danger. By the way, this is for you." Charles took a dog tag from around his neck and placed it on mine. There's a tracking chip inside. If you're ever in danger, I can find you immediately. The dog tag still carried his warmth, and I carefully tucked it into my collar, pressing it against my chest. On the way back to the old house, my steps felt much lighter, although Alice's threat still loomed. I was no longer fighting alone. Charles and I, we are one. In the days that followed, the village underwent earth-shaking changes, because my accurate prediction of the flash flood had spread far and wide. People from neighboring villages came every day seeking medical advice and divination. I cautiously used the spiritual spring's abilities while also organizing the villagers to cultivate high-value medicinal herbs. Sarah, officials from the county's agricultural bureau are here. They want to promote your planting experience. 1 noon, Mrs. Williams rushed over excitedly to tell me. At the village committee, I met the expert team from the county Agricultural Bureau. They were full of praise for the planting technique I invented and immediately decided to designate our village as a demonstration base. Sarah, we hope you will take on the role of the cooperative leader, the bureau chief said, shaking my hand. The county will provide startup funds and technical support. I was so surprised that I couldn't speak. In my previous life at this time, I was still a pitiful wretch despised by my family, but now I am about to lead the entire village to prosperity. I object. A sharp voice suddenly rang out. Alice was standing at the doorway, her face dark and gloomy. All her so-called techniques are a scam. They're not some ancestral secret recipe at all. The meeting room fell silent instantly. All eyes were fixed on me, waiting for my response. I stood up calmly and said, Sis, if you say my techniques are a scam, then why are the herbs I grow of better quality than others? Why can they sell for a higher price? Because. You use dark magic, Alice screamed hysterically. Grandma told me before she died that you were possessed by evil spirits. The villagers grew restless, and some showed expressions of fear. Just as I was about to refute, a calm male voice came from behind. I can prove that Sarah's technique is entirely scientific. Charles strode into the conference room, his military uniform impeccably pressed, exuding a powerful presence. An elderly man with white hair followed closely behind him. This is Professor John from the Provincial Academy of Agricultural Sciences, specializing in traditional agricultural techniques, Charles introduced. He analyzed Sarah's planting methods and found that they are an innovative blend of ancient practices and modern science. Professor John nodded with a smile. Sarah has revived many ancient cultivation techniques that were on the verge of being lost. Truly remarkable. The situation instantly reversed. The villagers cheered, and even the director looked at me with newfound respect. Alice stood in the corner, her face ashen, the jade pendant in her hand now bearing another crack. After the meeting, Charles quietly told me, Professor John was invited by me. I remembered he was your idol in your past life, so my heart warmed. He even remembers such details. However, the good times didn't last long. That night, when I entered the spiritual spring space, the sight before me made my heart tighten. The water level of the spiritual spring had dropped by nearly a third again. The grayish-white area at the edge of the black soil had expanded, and that grayish-white was spreading toward the center. What was even more frightening was that I began to feel inexplicably tired and dizzy. When I looked in the mirror, I saw that my face was as pale as a ghost, with deep, dark circles under my eyes. What's going on? I searched through the Spiritual Spring Manual and finally found small text in a corner of a page. Spiritual energy stolen, source damaged. If not stopped early, the master is in danger. I gasped sharply. Someone is stealing my spiritual spring energy. Recalling Alice's strange jade pendant and her unusual behavior, the answer became clear. Early the next morning, I forced myself, despite my weakened state, to go find Charles, but I was struck by a sharp pain halfway there. My vision darkened as I leaned against a tree trunk by the roadside, and suddenly I saw a vision. Alice kneeling in her backyard, cutting her palm with a knife and dripping blood onto the jade pendant. The pendant greedily absorbed the blood, and the green light within its cracks grew increasingly intense. After the image disappeared, I was drenched in cold sweat. This is an automatically triggered warning from my precognitive ability. Alice is activating the jade pendant with a blood sacrifice, and the pendant is stealing the energy from my spiritual spring. I must stop her, or I'll be drained of spiritual energy and die before she even makes a move. But how to stop it? A direct confrontation is too dangerous, especially now that she has that sinister power. Just as I was pondering, my phone rang. It was a text from Charles. Emergency mission, leaving for 3 days. Keep the military ID on. Be careful with the jade pendant. I gripped my phone tightly, feeling both disappointed and relieved. Lost in the moment of crisis, he couldn't be by my side. But I was relieved that he didn't have to face this supernatural danger immediately. Returning to the old house, I mustered my strength and entered the spirit spring space. hoping to find a way to counter the jade pendant. This time, the space had deteriorated even further. The spring water was almost dried up, 2/3 of the black soil had turned ashen gray, and even the glow of the secret tome had dimmed significantly. I knelt despairingly by the spring when I suddenly noticed that the secret tome had turned to a completely new page. It depicts two connected circles, one lush and vibrant, the other dark and withered. A thin red line connects the two circles. Below the image, there is a line of small text: twin realms, one righteous, one evil. Sever the line, break the connection, and evil cannot overcome righteousness. It suddenly dawned on me, so Alice's jade pendant also contains a realm, a twin to my spiritual spring realm. She is activating the evil jade space through a blood sacrifice and using it to steal my spiritual energy. We must find a way to sever the connection between the two spaces, but how? The ancient text doesn't provide an answer. After exiting the space, I lay weakly on the bed, barely having the strength to even lift my hand. The sunlight outside the window is clearly warm, yet I feel a bone-chilling cold. Is this the consequence of having my psychic energy stolen? In a daze, I heard the sound of the courtyard gate being pushed open. I barely managed to open my eyelids and saw Alice standing by the bed, a triumphant smile on her face. "Sister, how did you get so sick?" she asked insincerely, toying with the jade pendant that shimmered with a green glow. "Do you want me to call a doctor for you?" I wanted to shout, but no sound came out. I wanted to move, but it felt like I was bound by invisible ropes. I could only watch helplessly as she leaned down and whispered softly in my ear, "Don't worry, the pain will be over soon. Once you're dead, your treasure and Captain Charles will be mine." I wanted to resist, but I couldn't even move a finger. My eyelids felt as heavy as lead, forced to slowly close. The last thing I saw was Alice's triumphant, twisted smile and the jade pendant in her hand, glowing with an intense green light. Before consciousness sank into darkness, the bear-shaped hair tie on my wrist suddenly grew hot, so hot it almost burned my skin. A surge of warmth flowed from the hair tie into my body, temporarily driving away some of the chill. I snapped my eyes open, gasping for air. Alice was already gone, and I was the only one left in the room. Outside, the sky had darkened. I had actually been unconscious for an entire day, struggling to get up. I immediately checked the spirit spring space. The sight made my heart tighten. The spring water had almost dried up, the black soil had all turned ashen gray, and the secret manual had fallen to the ground, its glow as dim as a flickering candle in the wind. The most terrifying part was a crack that had appeared at the edge of the space. Through the crack, I could see another dim, gray space. Inside it, a jade pendant shimmered with a green light. Unmistakably Alice's. "Is this the twin space?" I murmured to myself, reaching out to touch the crack. No, the ancient tome suddenly flipped its pages on its own, revealing a massive warning text: "The cursed jade space, touch it and you die." I withdrew my hand, and the tome continued to display: "The true jade lies in the tomb. This is a fake. The twins are connected. Destroy the true one to sever the link." I widened my eyes. The true jade is in the tomb, Grandma's tomb. Then what Alice is holding is— My thoughts were interrupted by the commotion outside the courtyard. I dragged my weak body to the window and saw a group of villagers running through the village with torches. Someone shouted, "Another cow has died. All its blood is gone. It's the work of evil spirits. Go find Miss You. She knows about these things." I forced myself to straighten my clothes, and as soon as I opened the door, I was surrounded by several villagers. Their faces were filled with terror as they all spoke at once, describing the strange occurrences in the village. For 3 consecutive nights, livestock had died mysteriously, their blood completely drained, and their bodies dried up like mummies. "Take me to see," I said, in front of Jim's cowshed at the east end of the village. A crowd had already gathered. Upon seeing me, the crowd automatically made way. The cow's corpse lay on the haystack, just as they had said, completely shriveled, with its eyes turned into 2 black holes. Even more bizarrely, there were 2 small holes on the cow's neck, with the surrounding skin showing a web-like pattern of grayish-green veins, exactly like the cracks on Alice's jade pendant. What did this?" Jim asked, trembling. I was about to answer when I suddenly felt a strong dizziness and almost fell. Fortunately, someone caught me. Turning my head, I saw it was Charles. "Didn't he say he'd be gone for 3 days? Why did he come back early?" "Everyone, step back and let Sarah rest." Charles's voice was steady and firm, and the villagers immediately complied. He half embraced me as we walked to a secluded spot, his expression grave. "The situation is more serious than we imagined. Alice, she activated the jade pendant," I said weakly, "but it's not the real one. The real jade pendant is still in Grandma's grave." A flicker of shock passed through Charles's eyes. "How do you know?" "The spiritual spring space revealed it." I briefly explained the matter of the twin spaces. "We must Stop her from finding the real jade pendant, or else, before the words had even finished, a piercing, shrill laughter suddenly echoed through the village. We followed the sound and saw Alice standing on her rooftop, the jade pendant in her hand glowing with an intense green light, illuminating her wildly distorted face. "Ha, you insignificant ants," her voice had become unnaturally sharp, as if multiple people were speaking at once. "Kneel and beg for mercy now, and I might spare your lives." The villagers were terrified. Some had already dropped to their knees. Alice proudly raised the jade pendant, its green light forming a beam that shot straight into the sky. The clouds in the night sky were dyed an eerie green and began to spin rapidly. "She can no longer control that power," Charles whispered. "I'll stop her. You go to Grandma's grave and make sure the real jade pendant is safe. But you," Charles kissed my forehead, and this sudden intimacy caught me off guard. "Trust me, I have special equipment." He pulled a small metal case from his military uniform pocket and opened it to reveal a bullet engraved with runes. "Specially made exorcism bullet," he explained briefly, "originally meant for dealing with border cults." I nodded and turned to run toward the back mountain. Though my body was weak, the instinct to survive made me run swiftly. The little bear hair tie on my wrist continued to emit a faint warmth, sustaining the last bit of my strength. Grandma's grave was halfway up the back hill, looking especially lonely under the moonlight. As I approached, I gasped. The grave had been dug open, the coffin lid was thrown aside, and Grandma's body lay exposed under the moonlight. I trembled as I approached, astonished to find Grandma's hands folded over her chest, with something seemingly pressed beneath her palms, gently moving aside her cold hands. A jade pendant, identical to the one in my memory, lay there quietly. However, this one was entirely white, without a single crack. "This is the real one." I carefully picked up the jade pendant. The moment it touched my hand, a warm energy flowed through my entire body, temporarily dispelling the feeling of weakness. At that moment, footsteps sounded from behind. I turned around and saw Alice standing at the edge of the tomb, her clothes tattered, her eyes glowing with a green light. The cracks on the counterfeit jade pendant in her hand had spread across its entire surface, as if it might shatter at any moment. "So it is here after all," she sneered. "Give me the real jade, not a chance." I shielded the real jade pendant against my chest. "Look at yourself. You've been corrupted by dark forces." Alice looked down at herself. A faint green light pulsed beneath her skin, as if countless tiny insects were crawling beneath the surface, but she only laughed. "So what? This power makes me stronger than ever before." She leaped into the tomb and lunged at me. I barely dodged, but my weakened body was still knocked to the ground by her. The genuine jade pendant flew out of her hand and landed beside Grandma's remains. Alice lunged for the genuine jade pendant, but just as she was about to touch it, she let out a sharp cry. The pendant suddenly emitted a blinding white light, violently repelling her. "Impossible," she screamed, as the fake jade pendant in her hand glowed with an intense green light. "I am the chosen one." The fake jade pendant shot out a beam of green light, striking the genuine one. Two forces collided in the air, and the resulting shockwave sent both me and Alice tumbling to the ground. I struggled to get up and saw two jade pendants suspended in the air, one white and one green, confronting each other. Even stranger, the little bear hair tie on my wrist also began to glow, resonating with the white light of the true jade pendant. Alice also noticed this, a flash of wild jealousy in her eyes. "It's you again, always you." She suddenly changed her target and lunged at me. "If you die, the treasure will be mine." At the critical moment, a dark figure leaped down from above the tomb, knocking Alice aside. It was Charles. There was blood on his face, and his military uniform was torn, but his eyes were still as sharp as a knife. "Sarah, catch." He threw me a military dagger. "Use this to cut the connection." I caught the dagger, not understanding what he meant. Charles, while dealing with the frantic Alice, shouted, "Look at the ground." I looked down and was stunned. Countless thin red lines had appeared on the ground at some point, stretching like blood vessels from Alice's wrist, some connected to the fake jade pendant, while others were actually connected to the little bear hair tie on my wrist. This is the physical manifestation of the twin space. Suddenly, it dawned on me. I raised the dagger and slashed at those red lines. No. Alice let out an inhuman scream as the counterfeit jade pendant erupted with a blinding green light. Charles was thrown back by an invisible force, crashing heavily against the tomb wall. The moment the red thread was severed, both jade pendants emitted a piercing, dazzling light. I felt a sharp pain shoot through the hair tie, as if something had been violently torn away. After the intense light, the counterfeit jade pendant fell to the ground with a crack, shattering into several pieces. Alice knelt on the ground, scratching her arms in agony as the green light beneath her skin frantically surged. The genuine jade pendant slowly floated back into my hand, its white light now much Gentler, I immediately looked over at Charles. He had already gotten up, and though disheveled, he seemed to be unharmed. We must hurry back to the village. Charles helped me up. The villagers are being affected by evil energy and have started attacking each other. Before leaving, I took one last look at Grandma's remains. Strangely, her face looked more serene than when she was buried, even carrying a faint smile. I gently closed the coffin lid again, promising to return someday for a proper burial. On the way back to the village, the genuine jade pendant continued to emit a warm white light, dispelling the surrounding evil energy. I felt a trace of strength returning to my body, but the spiritual spring space remained sealed and inaccessible. The village was in chaos. Villagers affected by the evil energy wandered like zombies, attacking anyone they saw. Charles shielded me from several waves of attacks as we retreated toward the old house. The military has sent people, Charles whispered, but they won't arrive until tomorrow morning. We have to hold out for the night. As soon as we returned to the old house, Charles's military communicator rang. His expression turned unusually grim after he answered the call. "What's wrong?" I asked. "My superior ordered me to return to the unit immediately." He clenched his fist. "There's an urgent mission." My heart sank to the bottom at this most dangerous moment. The only person who could protect me is about to leave. Charles saw my fear and held my hand. "I won't abandon you, but orders are orders. Go ahead." I fought back tears. "I have the real jade pendant to protect me." Charles hesitated for a moment, then suddenly took off a necklace from his neck with an ancient copper coin hanging from it. "This is my family heirloom talisman. It can ward off evil and misfortune. Keep it." As soon as he put the necklace around my neck, the communicator rang again. This time it was even more urgent. With no other choice, Charles quickly kissed my forehead. "Lock the doors and windows, and don't open them for anyone. The military will arrive tomorrow morning." After seeing Charles off, I locked all the doors and windows and drew the curtains. The genuine jade pendant lay on the table, emitting a steady white light. I tried to enter the spiritual spring space again, but still failed. However, when I held the genuine jade pendant, a piece of information suddenly surfaced in my mind. When the spiritual spring merges with the black soil, it can produce a sacred antidote, but the space will be destroyed. Be cautious, be cautious. I trembled all over. This is the way to save the villagers, but at the cost of losing the spiritual spring space. Without hesitation, I gripped the jade pendant. "Tell me how to do it." The jade pendant emitted a flash of white light, and a complex ritual process appeared in my mind. I needed to bury the genuine jade pendant together with the hair tie in the black soil, recite a specific incantation, and let the two forces merge. The problem is, I can't get into the space right now. How do I bury the stuff? As if responding to my confusion, the little bear hair tie on my wrist suddenly grew warm. Immediately after, a small black hole appeared in front of me, just big enough for a hand to reach into. This is the last chance. I took a deep breath, stuffed the real jade pendant and the hair tie into the black hole, and recited the incantation as instructed in my mind. With the spirit spring as the guide, the black earth as the foundation. Sacrifice space, save all living beings. The black hole shook violently, and a dazzling white light burst forth from it. I felt a heart-wrenching pain, as if a piece of my soul had been torn away. When the light faded, the black hole disappeared. The little bear hair tie on my wrist was also gone, replaced by a small bottle of crystal clear liquid on the table. The ultimate antidote, the spiritual spring space, was gone forever. I felt a wave of emptiness and loss, but then I steeled myself. Exchanging space for hundreds of lives is worth it. Outside the window, the villagers' howls grew closer. I gripped the life-saving potion, ready to face the final darkness before dawn. As dawn began to break, I held the antidote and peered through the window crack to assess the situation outside. The villagers are still wandering, but their movements are much slower than last night, like toys that haven't been fully wound up. After the true jade pendant merged with the hair tie, I lost the spiritual spring space, but a warm current began to flow slowly through my meridians. I tried to guide this energy to my fingertips, and a faint white light actually appeared. Is this the power of the true jade pendant? I murmured to myself, gently pushing open the door. The first to find me was Aunt Jane next door. She turned her head mechanically, her eyes dull and lifeless, a strange smile hanging at the corner of her mouth. "Miss you. Fairy Lynn is looking for you." Fairy Lynn. A chill ran through my heart. Has Alice already declared herself a fairy overnight? Aunt Jane suddenly lunged forward, her withered fingers clawing at my face like an eagle's talons. I sidestepped to dodge, then gently tapped her forehead in one fluid motion. A flash of white light vanished from my fingertip, and Aunt Jane shuddered, the cloudiness in her eyes gradually fading. What happened to me?" she murmured, looking around in confusion. When she saw the other villagers, she covered her mouth in Horror, oh my god, Aunt Jane, go home and lock the door, don't open it for anyone, I whispered, then continued walking forward. Whenever I encountered a controlled villager, I touched their forehead with the white light at my fingertips. Most people regained consciousness immediately, but a few, tainted by too much evil energy, required a bit more effort. When I reached the center of the village, I stopped in my tracks. Alice, no. It should now be called the monster controlled by the evil jade, stood on the edge of the well, looking down at the entire village. Her clothes had turned into an eerie dark green, with a faint green glow flowing beneath her skin. Her face was distorted, no longer resembling a human. Below the well, dozens of villagers knelt, mechanically repeating, "Hail, Immortal Lynn, hail, Immortal Lynn, sister, you've finally come." Alice's voice had become layered, as if several people were speaking at once. "Look at my followers, how devout they are." I gripped the medicine bottle tightly. "Alice, wake up, that jade pendant is consuming your life." She laughed, the sound piercing my eardrums. "Life, what does that matter? What I have now is power, limitless power." She raised her hand, palm upward, and a ball of green light took shape. "Kneel, worship me like the others, and I might spare your life." "You're insane." I slowly backed away, searching for cover. "Where is the real jade pendant?" Alice's expression twisted into a snarl. "Shut up, that should have been mine." Grandma was biased. "She only told you the location of the real jade pendant before she died." She suddenly leaped down from the well platform, moving with a speed unlike any human. "But it doesn't matter. Once I kill you, the real jade pendant will naturally recognize me as its master." I turned and ran, Alice's shrill laughter following closely behind. After turning a few corners, I hid in an abandoned woodshed, holding my breath. Outside the door, Alice's footsteps came to a halt. "Playing hide and seek, little sister." Her voice drifted near and far. "I remember you always loved this game as a child, but I was always the one to find you. This time will be no exception." The door of the woodshed was suddenly flung open by an invisible force, and Alice stood at the entrance, her eyes glowing with an intense green light. She reached out and grabbed, and I felt as if an invisible hand was choking my neck, lifting me off the ground. "Found you," she sneered, tightening her grip. I struggled desperately, pulling a medicine bottle from my pocket and throwing it at her with all my might. The bottle traced an arc through the air, striking her squarely between the eyebrows. "Ah!" Alice let out a sharp cry and released her hold on me. The potion splashed onto her face, emitting a puff of white smoke. She frantically clotted her face, the green light beneath her skin fluctuating violently. I took the chance to get up and run, but I was surrounded by a group of controlled villagers. After only a few steps, they approached expressionlessly, their eyes gleaming with the same green light as Alice's. "Grab her!" Alice screamed from behind. "I want to dig out her heart with my own hands." The villagers swarmed forward. I darted left and right, using the white light at my fingertips to take down a few, but more people closed in. Just as I was about to give in, a dark figure descended from the sky and, with a few swift moves, knocked out a circle of villagers. "Charles!" I cried out in pleasant surprise. He was clad in full combat gear, his face painted with camouflage, and his eyes held the familiar determination. "Sarah, follow me." Charles pulled me out of the encirclement and dashed into a hidden path behind us. Alice's scream echoed through the entire village. Find them for me." We hid in a cellar, and after confirming it was safe, Charles immediately checked my injuries. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." I grabbed his hand. "Why did you come back? Weren't you on an urgent mission?" "The mission is here." Charles lowered his voice. "The military detected abnormal magnetic field fluctuations and sent our special paranormal incident team to investigate." He took a device from his waist, which showed intense fluctuations. "These readings, they've reached catastrophic levels." I briefly explained the situation with Alice and the jade pendant. Charles's expression grew increasingly grim. "We must subdue her as soon as possible. If the evil energy spreads to the surrounding towns, the consequences would be unimaginable." "I have a way," I said. "The power of the real jade pendant is still within me. If I can get close to Alice, I might be able to purify the evil energy inside her." Charles shook his head. "It's too dangerous. She's completely controlled by the evil jade and is no longer your sister." "No, she's still struggling." I recalled Alice's words just now. She said Grandma only told me the location of the real jade pendant, but in fact, I found it in the tomb. Grandma didn't tell anyone. Charles's eyes lit up. "You mean, the evil jade is tampering with her memories, deepening her hatred for me?" I clenched my fist. "The real Alice is still in there. I have to save her." Charles pondered for a moment, then suddenly took out a metal box from his backpack. "Use this. It's a military-grade psionic inhibitor, specially made to temporarily block the power of the evil jade, but it only works once, and it has to be used at close range." We devised a simple plan. Charles would create a distraction outside to draw Alice's attention, while I would take the opportunity to get close to her and use the inhibitor. Be careful, Charles said, holding me tightly before we set off. Don't leave me again this time. I won't. I leaned against his chest, listening to his strong heartbeat. In this lifetime, we'll grow old together. Charles charged out first. After a few gunshots, chaos erupted outside. I quietly circled around to Alice's rear and saw her frantically firing green energy bolts in Charles's direction. Damn soldiers, in my past life, it was you who helped her, Alice screamed. This time, I'll kill all of you. I slowly moved closer, my heart pounding like a drum. When I was just 3 steps away, Alice suddenly turned around, a sinister smile on her face. I knew you'd come from behind, little sister. A green light struck my chest, sending me flying several meters before I crashed heavily to the ground. The suppressor flew out of my hand and slid to Alice's feet. What is this? Trying to use it against me, she picked up the suppressor and crushed it effortlessly into scrap metal. It's useless, little sister. No one can defeat me now. Charles tried to rush to my aid, but he was held back by a group of villagers. Alice slowly approached, looking down at me from above. Do you know why I hate you so much? I struggled to prop myself up. Because, the jade pendant. No. She suddenly erupted in anger. It's because you always get the best of everything. Grandma's affection, Charles's love, the villagers' respect. Even after being reborn, you still get a better spiritual spring space. Her voice returned to its original tone, and the green light in her eyes dimmed for a moment. Why are you always the lucky one? I looked at her contorted face and suddenly understood the root cause. Sis, you're wrong. Grandma loved you just as much, but you never saw it. Nonsense. Alice raised her hand to attack again but suddenly froze. The green light beneath her skin began to fluctuate violently, and fine cracks appeared on her face. She bent over in pain. No, not now. I realized the evil jade was starting to backfire. This is my chance. Gritting my teeth against the pain, I struggled to my feet and lunged at Alice, pressing my hands against her temples and pouring all the white light within me into her. Alice let out an inhuman scream. Her entire body convulsing violently. Green and white light clashed within her, and the cracks on her skin multiplied rapidly. Let go, she struggled desperately. You'll kill us both. No, I'm saving you. I gritted my teeth and persisted, the white light continuously flowing. Alice, do you remember when you had a fever as a child, and Grandma stayed by your bedside all night? Do you remember the first time you made a dress, and Mom praised your skill? Do you remember that lipstick Dad secretly bought for you? Alice's struggle weakened, the green light in her eyes flickering. Uncertainly, they all love you. It's just that you're too fixated on comparisons to see the happiness you already have. My voice choked up. In this life, I had hoped to get along well with you. Alice suddenly let out a heart-wrenching scream, and a blinding green light erupted from within her, violently throwing me backward. I crashed against the wall. My vision went dark, and I nearly lost consciousness. In my blurred vision, I saw Alice kneeling on the ground, green fragments being expelled from her body. They were the remnants of that counterfeit jade pendant. With each piece expelled, she grew weaker, until she finally collapsed to the ground, restored to her original appearance. The surrounding villagers also fell one after another, dark energy emanating from their bodies. Charles rushed to my side and helped me up. Sarah, are you okay? I'm fine. I weakly pointed at Alice. Check on her. Alice lay on the ground, breathing weakly. Her skin was covered in fine cracks, like a porcelain doll that might shatter at any moment. I crawled to her side and found she was still conscious. Why did you save me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Because you're my sister, I said softly, taking her hand. In this life, I still choose to forgive. 2 streams of tears flowed from Alice's eyes, trickling down her cracked cheeks. I'm sorry. Just then, the distant roar of a helicopter could be heard. Charles's expression changed. The military's main force is here, Sarah. We have to leave immediately. According to protocol, all individuals involved in paranormal incidents must be taken in for research. What about Alice? Charles shook his head heavily. In her condition, I'm afraid she'll be dealt with on the spot. I looked at the dying Alice and made a decision. Take her with us. What? She is my sister, I said firmly. I will heal her. Charles and I locked eyes for a moment before he finally nodded. All right, but we must act immediately. He carried Alice on his back, and I followed closely behind as the 3 of us ran toward the deep mountains behind the village. Behind us, the helicopter's searchlight had already swept across the center of the village, and the military's commands echoed through a loudspeaker. Everyone, stay where you are. Repeat, everyone, stay where you are. We ducked into the dense forest, temporarily evading capture, but Alice's condition was getting worse. Her breathing had almost stopped, and the cracks on her body began to bleed. She won't last much longer, Charles said after checking. She needs immediate treatment. I held Alice's hand and channeled the last of the white light within me into her body. The cracks stopped spreading, but there was no sign of healing. Not enough, I gasped. I need more power. Suddenly remembering something, Charles pulled an amulet from his collar. Try this, it's been passed down in my family, said to have healing powers. The amulet was an ancient copper coin with strange runes carved on it. As soon as I placed it on Alice's chest, the coin emitted a faint golden light. Alice's cracks began to slowly heal, and her breathing steadied. It's working, I exclaimed in surprise. Charles, however, looked grave. But this can only stabilize her temporarily. To fully cure her, we need a more powerful purifying force. I gazed deeper into the mountains, and a thought suddenly came to me. I know where to go, Grandma's grave. The power of the true jade pendant originates from there. Perhaps, we have no choice. We set off towards Grandma's grave under the cover of night. Alice's life, the safety of the villagers, and the future of Charles and me all depend on this last hope. The mountain path glowed pale under the moonlight. Charles carried the barely conscious Alice on his back, and I followed closely behind as the three of us struggled through the dense forest. Indiana, the distance behind us. Military searchlights occasionally swept across the treetops, with the sound of barking dogs and radio static fading in and out. How much farther? Charles whispered, his military uniform already soaked with sweat. Almost there, I panted, pointing toward the mountainside. Just beyond that patch of pine trees. Alice let out a faint moan on Charles's back, and the cracks on her skin began to bleed again. The glow of the copper coin amulet was growing weaker. We had to hurry to Grandma's grave. Passing through the last patch of bushes, the view suddenly opened up. Grandma's grave remained in its dug-up state, the coffin lid tilted to the side, looking particularly desolate under the moonlight. I jumped into the grave and carefully examined my grandmother's remains. I hadn't noticed it in the rush last time, but now I realized that the way her hands were folded seemed odd, as if deliberately pointing to a certain spot in the coffin. Charles, help me out. I gently moved my grandmother's arm and pointed to the coffin's baseboard. There's something strange here. Charles jumped down to help, and together we moved the baseboard aside, revealing the soil beneath. I hadn't dug even a foot deep when my fingertips suddenly touched something hard, a bluestone slab covered in carved runes. This is, Charles brushed away the soil, revealing a groove in the center of the slab. Its shape was a perfect match for the real jade pendant. It suddenly dawned on me, Grandma didn't place the real jade pendant here by chance. I took out the now dull real jade pendant from my pocket and carefully placed it into the groove. A perfect fit. In an instant, the runes on the stone slab lit up one by one, emitting a soft blue glow. The entire tomb began to tremble slightly, and the soil beneath the coffin slowly sank, revealing a narrow staircase leading into the darkness below, an underground chamber. Charles raised an eyebrow in surprise. What exactly was your grandmother? I don't know. I was equally shocked. She never mentioned it. Alice suddenly coughed violently, with traces of blood seeping from the corner of her mouth. There was no time to hesitate. Charles lifted her onto his back again, and I led the way with the glowing stone slab. The three of us descended the stairs. At the end of the stairs was a circular stone chamber, its walls covered in ancient murals. In the center stood a small altar, on which rested a book with a bronze cover, identical to the secret tome of the Spirit Spring. Is this the original copy of the Spiritual Spring Codex? I approached the altar, and as soon as my fingers touched the bronze cover, the entire stone chamber lit up. The murals on the walls began to flow, telling an ancient story. 1,000 years ago, a pair of twin sisters discovered a spiritual spring. The older sister was greedy and wanted to monopolize the spring, while the younger sister was selfless and wished to share it with others. In their struggle, the spiritual spring split into two. The older sister obtained the polluted evil spring, while the younger sister guarded the pure spiritual spring. After their deaths, their powers were sealed into two jade pendants, guarded by their descendants for generations. So the spiritual spring and the evil jade were originally one and the same. I murmured, was Grandma the guardian of this generation? Charles placed Alice beside the altar. The murals say that only a pure heart can harness the power of the spiritual spring. Sarah, perhaps you can save her. I knelt beside Alice, holding her cold hand. The cracks on her skin had spread all over her body, like a porcelain doll that would shatter at the slightest touch. How can I save her? The spiritual spring space has already disappeared. The bronze secret tome suddenly opened on its own, stopping on a page. A person is depicted placing a hand on another's chest, with two jade pendants floating between them. You must merge your powers, Charles interpreted. Use the genuine jade pendant to guide the dark jade energy within her and transform it into spiritual power. I took a deep breath, placed the genuine jade pendant on Alice's chest, and pressed my other hand against her forehead. Closing my eyes, I focused on the faint warmth still lingering within me, slowly guiding it through my arm and into Alice's body. At first, nothing happened. Suddenly, Alice's entire body convulsed violently, and a green light burst from within her, clashing fiercely with the white light of the true jade pendant. Hold on. Charles pressed down on my shoulders. She's resisting. I gritted my teeth and continued to channel energy. Memories of Alice flood my mind, how she shielded me from my father's rod when we were kids, secretly shared half a candy with me, mended my torn clothes for me. Sis, come back, I choked out. I forgive you. I've always forgiven you. As if in response to my call, the green light within Alice began to fade, gradually merging into the white light. The jade pendant grew increasingly hot until it cracked in two with a sharp sound, releasing a powerful energy wave that threw both Charles and me to the ground. The stone chamber shook violently, and the murals on the walls began to peel off. Charles pulled me up urgently. It's going to collapse. We have to go. But Alice, beside the altar, Alice slowly sat up. The cracks on her body were healing at a visible rate, and the green light in her eyes had completely vanished, returning to their original brown irises. Sarah, she called out weakly, her voice filled with a long-lost warmth. I rushed over and hugged her. Let's go. The three of them stumbled up the steps and had just rushed out of the tomb when the staircase behind them collapsed with a loud crash. Grandma's coffin also sank into the ground, and the tomb automatically closed, returning to its original state as if nothing had ever happened. The eastern sky was already turning pale, and a new day was about to begin. Alice, weak but conscious, leaned on my shoulder, tears silently streaming down her face. Why did you save me? I gently wiped away her tears. Because you're my sister. The village at the foot of the mountain gradually awoke. As the evil jade's power faded, the controlled villagers returned to normal. The military helicopters were still circling but had ceased their search. Charles's communicator suddenly rang. After answering, his expression shifted from tense to relaxed. The higher-ups have ordered the operation to be halted. All anomalies have disappeared. He looked at Alice. Your warrant has been revoked. The military believes you're a victim, not the mastermind. Alice lowered her head. I really did so many wrong things. There's a chance to make amends. Charles patted her shoulder. For now, let's find a safe place for you to rest. 3 months later, the village returned to peace. Alice had mostly recovered, though faint marks remained on her skin, like a kind of reminder. She voluntarily apologized to the entire village and used her savings to compensate the affected villagers for their losses. Charles and I held our wedding in the spring. It was simple but warm, and the whole village came to offer their blessings. What was most surprising was that Alice sent a hand-embroidered wedding curtain, featuring mandarin ducks with intertwined necks and twin lotus flowers on one stalk. I don't ask for your forgiveness, she said with her head lowered. I just want you to know that I've changed. I took the wedding curtain and gave her a hug. We will never have the closeness of ordinary sisters, but at least the chain of hatred has been broken. After marriage, Charles and I started an eco-farm in the village, using ancient cultivation methods recorded in the Spirit Spring Secret Manual. We avoided chemical fertilizers and pesticides, yet the crops thrived. The farm quickly became a model for the entire county, even attracting visits and inspections from provincial leaders. Alice went to the county town and started working at a clothing factory. I heard she is very skilled and has already been promoted to a team leader. On every holiday, she would send gifts, sometimes a piece of clothing, sometimes a pair of handmade shoes. As for the spiritual spring space, it has indeed vanished forever, but interestingly, whenever I focus on cultivating crops, a warm glow occasionally flashes at my fingertips, making the plants grow exceptionally lush. Charles says that it is the inner light within me, more precious than any external power. We renovated Grandma's gravesite and planted her favorite gardenias. Sometimes, passing by in the early morning, I see dewdrops on the petals, just like droplets from a spiritual spring. Standing on the high ground of the farm, looking out at the lush fields and the distant rolling green mountains, I held Charles's hand tightly. In this lifetime, we have finally grasped happiness, and that once hate-filled Sarah, like the spiritual spring space, has become a thing of the past. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.